Welcome one and all, it's time for yet another Warhammer Age of Sigmar tournament report featuring the Stormcast Eternals. It's Realmgate Rebellion GT 2 from the TSN Arena in Nottingham. 5 games, 2,000 points, 16 players, 7 Stormcast players in attendance, so we could see some mirror matches here. And it's new, spicy, succulent, exciting times, because there's a fresh, brand new, spicy new unit right there. The Vanguard-Palladors, freshly painted. New for me, not new for the Age of Sigmar. Obviously, they've been around for years. But I only just got them finished, and now they're out there at a tournament without any practice games. So what could possibly go wrong? Let's see how it goes. There is my force. And immediately, the first thing that's odd about this is that this is clearly the Krondys model. Clearly to me. However, at most events, people seem to not be able to tell the difference really between Krondys and Karazai. They have to have it explained to them which one it is before each game. So I thought, if half the people think it's Karazai anyway, why not just run it as Karazai sometimes? The only difference is that Karazai isn't supposed to wear armour and he's got a bit of a scar on his face. But one's blue, one's red, I've done mine purple, so why not run it as both of them sometimes? So, trying this guy out as Karazai at this event, so the difference being that he doesn't cast spells, but he kicks a lot of people's butts, and it's very difficult to attack him because he's good at reducing enemy attacks, which you can double down on with the bodyguard season rules with these praetors right here, who will also be giving him a ward save from hanging around him. So that's the General's Regiment, Karazai and some praetors. Also in there, we've got the Vanguard-Palladors with Star Strike Javelins, which no one is ever going to call them that full name. They're just going to be Palladors with Javelins. And what are they good at? Well, they're extremely fast. 14-inch move. They can run and charge, run and shoot and charge. So potentially you can move 20 inches, shoot the enemy, charge the enemy, and then because you charged, you can then shoot with the javelins again in the charge phase, and then you get to fight. So, potentially very tasty. They can also retreat and shoot and charge as well. So if you get stuck in combat, you can just leave and then charge back in again. Particularly if you're in a situation where you can get a double turn, for example. And you could also potentially use power through on them as well in certain combats, because they've got that very high movement characteristics, so they can get quite far away. Also, we've got the 6 long strikes. So the long strikes and the Palladors, both of them, the issue lately is that the points have gone up. Does that stop people taking them? No, because long strikes are still very good. They get Rend 3 against heroes, which is very powerful, particularly big monster heroes who aren't able to hide and not be shot amongst the infantry. So, not a huge amount of damage numerically, but it's good quality damage that's very likely to go through. Downside, long strikes, they do not have a lot of wounds themselves, so if they get hit back, they die very quickly. And I can only bring 1 unit back at half strength per game, so there are some contenders in this list. The second regiment, we've got the Knight Arcanum. So the only spellcaster in the list who gets +1 to cast manifestations and +1 to banish them as well. So really just there to deliver a bit of purple sun action and maybe throw out some of the other Stormcast spells like -1 charge dice on enemy units could be very useful. And also, I've given the Knight Arcanum the Mirror Shield, so can't be shot at. And also, I've also given the Knight Arcanum the Envoy of the Heavens. And I don't know why I'm mentioning it, because I forgot it existed in every single game, even when at the start of the game I mentioned it to anyone who was nearby, the fact that I have it, to try and remind myself, but then I still forgot it anyway. So maybe I'll pick a different one that I'm more likely to remember, because what that's supposed to do is when you lose a unit, then you can pick a unit that's nearby to this hero to gain a 5+ ward save for the turn after. So it's actually very good, but only if you remember you've got it and you remember to use it, and you keep the hero close enough. And none of those things happen during this event, so I'm just never going to mention it again because I forgot it existed. In the Knight Arcanum's regiment, we have got the Questa Soulsworn. So they are handy because they're a solid number of wounds for the points. They're pretty decent in a fight. and they can get a ward save if they're on their one favourite objective, which you choose at the start of the game or in deployment. And if they're on that, they get a ward save, they get bonuses to control score. So some of the battle plans, less than ideal, because those objectives can sometimes disappear over the course of a game, in which case that leaves them with nowhere to get their precious ward save. And they get a teleport once per game as well, which is nice. Then we've got, what's this? Are these Judicators? No, they're not, because Judicators are about to be deleted from the game in a few months. So I'm getting used to life as these guys being Vigilors now, who are pretty much the same kind of thing. They're just Stormcast with bows, and the Vigilors are a little bit better at fighting. But these guys look like they could handle themselves in a fight, really, don't they? They're just big armoured tin cans with bows. So they are now Vigilors. Vigilors, of course, are good for damaging an enemy unit, which then means everyone else in the army is +1 to hit against that unit for the rest of the turn, which is very powerful, can save you a lot of command points for all-out attack, particularly if you're against big mega units. So what are we thinking? Something like an Archaean or a Nagash that you want to throw everything into at once, then sticking +1 to hit against that one unit. Very good. Also some of the... what else would be big and scary? Like a unit of 6 Vanguard, perhaps? Something that you just want to go all in and destroy, getting that +1 to hit for every unit. Very good ability. Endless spells, I've got the Purple Sun and the Shackles painted, so still, they're the only 2 spells I'm bringing. And we've got the Teleport Chamber of Doom as well. So I'm often going to be starting off the Questors next to that, so that they can teleport somewhere through there, and then they've got their one native teleport that they have themselves. They can then use that later when they're out there dealing with the enemy, preferably on their quest-marked objective. So we've got some nice close-ups of my paintwork of the Vanguard-Palladors here, and it took me a very long time. The eyes are actually very precise on these, because I've just got a painting magnifying lens, which is very handy. It's got a light on it as well, so it makes eyeballs much easier to paint. And Questors, looking cool as always, into the first round. Now, as I said, there are 7 Stormcast players at this event, so it's quite likely I'll face at least 1 or 2 of them. Feral Foray. So, the way this one works is you can shut down an objective in enemy territory, basically. And it has to be one that you control. So that is quite limiting. It means that you have to be in the enemy's territory controlling that objective, or at least have been there at some point to control it and then shut it down. I don't think you have to actively be contesting it at the time. Let's see. You can raid an objective in enemy territory that they contest. Oh, the underdog, I see. So the underdog can raid an objective that they contest but don't control. So that means if you just have 1 model on something and you're the underdog and the enemy's got 50 models on there, you can shut down that one objective, which is quite cool. So the underdog bonus is okay, but the main twist where you just shut down an objective very rarely comes up. It's usually if you've teleported 1 model, for example, onto an objective, the enemy is nearby, so on their turn they're going to try and immediately take it off you again. So potentially useful for that. We've got some little places of power out on the flanks, lots of terrain that you can walk on and hide in here, so woods or what does it go down as? Obscuring terrain. So, for the obscuring terrain, we're using these hills and these woods that have had the trees taken off because we're going to be moving into them shortly. So, the deal with this terrain is if you're wholly within it, then you can't be targeted by shooting, which is quite a big deal. You can say I'm up against Stormcast Eternals, and let me crack open that list here, which is on the Millarkey website, which is better than BCP, by the way, for anyone that follows the score and event tracking apps. So, cracking open that list right now. So, let's see. It's 2 drops, the same as mine. We have Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker. So, I'll get to the enemy forces. There we go. Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker. Very fancy pants indeed. Nice paintwork on these. Maybe you can't see from these angles, but the cloaks are very delightfully done on all these models, so you'll probably see some of those from other angles. But I think this model here actually won the best single miniature and this army in general, I believe, won the best or the coolest army award as well. So we've got Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker. We have got a Lord Terminos, who is here, hanging out with the Reclusians. And what's cool about them is that if the Lord Terminos is striking first with Quicksilver, which he's been given, the Reclusians can then fight immediately afterwards. And I haven't seen Reclusians with the exposed heads before, actually. They do look very cool. I think I've got all these heads, so they'll probably from other kits, because I'm sure Reclusians only come with helmets. But if I'm wrong, not really a big deal, is it? Then we've got Questa Soulsworn, so the same as mine. And they're obviously positioned at the start of the game with one eye on doing something like taking a flank. You can see the old non-metallic metal malarkey going on these. Very fancy pants indeed. We've got the Storm Coven, who are a wizard, but if they're on an objective, they get to cast 2 spells, and they can also cast a Strike First or Strike Last spell, which is quite powerful. What else have we got in there? We've got 6 Prosecutors, so a reinforced unit of those, and 6 Long Strikes, reinforced, just like mine. And we've also, at the back there, how did I miss him? Big Bad Bastion. So, Bastion, he is pretty good fighter, and if he kills models, he heals some wounds back. So he's pretty survivable. Maybe not if you pile a lot of things into him to attack at once, he doesn't have that many wounds, but if he's fighting just chaff units all game, he's never going to die, really. He's also very handy for the Stormcast because it's one of a couple of ways we have of not spending command points. So Bastion can issue all-out attack for free in every phase. So often he'll be doing that on himself, because he's obviously going to be close enough to himself to use it, and maybe the other units won't be all the time. Sometimes they will. And we also have, in my list, I've got the Vigilors, who can do something similar, putting +1 to hit on units. We've also got access to Ether Wings that can do a similar thing by being near the enemy for certain units, but they're not particularly great. So anything you can do that saves spending command points is a plus, because you don't just get command points growing on trees in this edition, not very many of them at all, and for some of the cooler things you want to do, like countercharging, they disappear very quickly. Or if you want to, for example, redeploy a unit of long strikes and then covering fire with them, that's going to cost you 2 to do both those things, so you're going to run out of them very fast. Now let's go back to the wide shot momentarily, and I'll tell you about my strategy here. So, you want to have more objectives than your opponent, and battle tactics. It's pretty straightforward. Shutting down the objectives might come up, but you can't really think too much about that because it's a little bit of a niche situation. What I'm spotting as a potential issue here is that the enemy long strikes are in this terrain, so I can't drop down and shoot them, which I would like to do because long strikes will very easily kill each other if they get the chance. So the first one to get the shot in on the other is probably going to reign supreme there. And by the way, don't know if I mentioned that this Stormcast list I'm up against here is Sentinels of the Bleak Citadels, which means that they can get 5+ ward on the... what's the chamber? These guys, the Reclusians, and the Prosecutors are in it anyway. Can't remember what it's called now. It's not Extremis. It's the other one. And then I've got the Vanguard wing, which means I can teleport my long strikes or the Palladors on a 3+ each turn. Okay, so we've got Karazai out on this side. Trying to get Karazai away from the Reclusians, basically, because I don't want to be hit first by a big pile of those dudes. They can do mortal wounds, which is scary, and also Lord Terminos. So I want to stay away from this big bundle of death, because Bastion's there as well. And also, importantly, the Storm Coven. I want to stay away from them because I don't want anyone putting Strike Last on Karazai. We've got, in the comments, that dragon would be a good friend to have on a rainy day. It would actually. That wing would certainly protect you against most of the elements that could rain down from the heavens, except maybe other Stormcast. So, Karazai is going to be really good at just clearing out anything on this side of the table, I think. going for the prosecutors. Don't want to get shot by long strikes, but if I have to, I'm going to have my ward save from keeping the praetors nearby. So hopefully he can survive that. And Karazai actually gets more powerful if you do a few wounds to him. So I don't care if he takes some damage. Got to be careful not to take too much, obviously, because then you die. The Palladors over on this side, they are able to strike at the enemy and then potentially get away again. So hit and run tactics. I don't want to engage this big bundle of doom here. Questors are just hanging out next to the teleport chamber so that they can zap away somewhere at some point. And I'll show you which one I pick as the quest marked objective in a minute and what my thinking is behind that. Off the table I've got my Vigilors and my long strikes. The shooty units, they're more fragile. I don't want any enemies teleporting near them and killing them. Because the enemy of course also have access to the teleportation. It's a very stylish Stormcast army. This, of all the 7 Stormcast armies that were at this event, all of them look very distinct from each other. And so my opponent picks this one as the quest marked objective for the Quest of Soulsworn, the one under the Palladors, and I pick the one on the far left underneath the prosecutors, because my thinking is they're not going to stick around. They're prosecutors. They're going to move fast and try and kill something. And maybe this thing will either discourage them from doing that, so they'll actually stay back and not participate in the game, which is fine with me because they're quite dangerous on the charge. Or they'll move out and I'll be able to jump on the objective, get my ward save, and potentially go after these long strikes. Because if you're going to drop down near long strikes, you want a ward save because they're going to be covering fire at you. So that's what we're thinking there. You can see that my opponent has taken the first turn here and is moving forward with Seize the Centre to get the Reclusians and the Lord Terminos to within range of the middle there. And oh, got a bit of a picture of Bastion's cloak. All the cloaks very stylishly done like this, with the kind of floral arrangement. So 8 points for my opponent for holding all of the home objectives, not getting into my territory yet though. So with a battle tactic, holds 1, holds 2, scores a battle tactic but does not hold more because we've got 3 each. So there's the state of the table as we head into my turn 1. You can see the prosecutors are actually not that interested in fighting yet. They've shuffled over this way. So what am I going to do? I could get my Palladors potentially to go and charge the Questors up there. And I would then be able to escape. As long as I don't get countercharged by anything. So I don't want to get countercharged by, for example, Bastion. So I'd want to ideally go up round this way. So that would be very difficult. And if I can get into those Questors, kill a load of them, and then power through and get away from them, run away again. So I'm not in range for the enemy's furious counter-strike with these fairly slow units here. All on foot. And then I can think about maybe putting my own Questors over here and go for the prosecutors and the long strikes there, try and get onto my quest marked objective and send Karazai around that way as well. Just ignore this bundle of death entirely here because I just don't want to deal with that. That's going to be a nightmare, especially with the Storm Coven, with the strike first, strike last effects. Don't want to have to deal with that at all. So I go for take their land. So I select, which one do I pick on this? I think it might be, it's either this or this. So you can see that the Palladors, they actually end up going around the front rather than the back because I didn't roll high enough on their charge to make it all the way around this building. So they ended up going through this way. But there was no countercharge from Bastion because I think my opponent was down to not enough command points to do it by that stage. So I wasn't concerned. You can see I've put Finest Hour on them as well because I really wanted to get those Questors cleared out in one go. And then I ended up using all-out attack as well. Because of the state of the board and the other things that had happened, I brought my long strikes down, shot up the enemy Reclusians a bit, brought my Vigilors down in the corner up there so that I could shoot at the Questors and get +1 hit against them. And then I totally forgot I'd done that, which is why I then used all-out attack. Because I thought, I really want to get these Questors killed, let's fully commit, let's go for it, won't bother about powering through to get away, just go all-out attack, try and kill them. But obviously it didn't work out, and I didn't even need to do it because I shot them with the Vigilors, so it was a total waste of a command point, and also cost myself the chance to do power through. Over on this side, my Questors drop down, And you can see I've all out defensed because they got covering fire aimed at them from the enemy long strikes. And I think these prosecutors redeployed out of range a bit, so it was a very difficult charge. So I'm just sitting there now. But Karazai is not being shot at, and I've got the Praetors up there with him. I've also got the Purple Sun out as well, so that could get involved at some point. So I score 8 points as well because I get my battle tactic. I think it was for this piece of terrain. So I'm holding that, and I hold all these 3 objectives. Into turn 2, and my opponent wins the priority and chooses take their land. So again, very easy for Stormcast, chooses this piece back here. The long strikes, what do? They do 8 wounds to Karazai, who's got all out defense and a 5+ ward from the bodyguard. But I'm not too disappointed with that because he's going to have more attacks when he goes in now, so as long as he's not dead, I'm fine with that. Everyone else, well, the prosecutors teleport over here with the teleport chamber. Everyone else is lining up to go and attack the Palladors. You can see are taking casualties from the shooting attacks. Bastion's got a shooting attack. Prosecutors do. And then everyone piles into them in combat. And they're getting killed. There's one left, and eventually when everyone strikes, they're dead. Now, you might think that's not a very good trade, because I didn't even kill the unit of Questors, and now they're dead. But this whole area, this is the bundle of dudes that I'm worried about. And now they're kind of committed to one side. The one place I don't want them to be is in the middle, because then they can theoretically strike everywhere. So if you've got them on one side, I'm happier with that because that allows me to now take more objectives without worrying about them, because all the death is here with the Reclusians, the Terminos and Bastion. Everything else I wouldn't be too concerned about in a fight. Prosecutors on the charge will do good damage though. And the Prosecutors landed far enough away from me so that I wouldn't bother covering fire on them, and it would be a waste of command points to use a redeploy and covering fire, because I might just redeploy 1 inch and only be able to shoot with 2, so I didn't bother shooting them, but that meant they were far enough away that they weren't able to reach the long strikes with their charge, so that's nice. So, my opponent scores 8 again. Battle tactic, taking my land, which was this piece here, and the 3 objectives. So next turn is when I'm going to try and start scoring big points, because I can get Karazai in to these long strikes potentially, and I can get someone onto this objective. So hopefully I'll hold more objectives than my opponent at the end of this round and take the lead. That is the plan. So here we go. I go for take the flanks because it's a nice easy one. If we look at the setup I've got the Questors over here, and I've got the Vigilors on that side. So already set up to do it. I don't need to worry about too much about being on my quest marked objective for reward save yet, because hopefully Karazai is going to get in there and murder the long strikes. And let's have a look how it goes. Well, you can see that the Questors are getting just within 6 of the table edge for the battle tactic. Karazai and a Purple Sun have got in there and just committed murder. Look, I put Finest Hour on him to get his save up in case he had to face some covering fire. And I actually rallied some wounds back as well. And then totally whooped the long strikes with all that attack. And I've got my Vigilors up in that corner just hiding. So there's the battle tactic. My long strikes, who are consolidating their position on this hill, fire into the enemy, and I think they kill another Reclusian, but it's not too big of a deal. So, I like the control I've got now. I've just taken the lead because I've got all of these, and it could be a very tight game. We've got the ability to teleport. We've got teleport chambers. We've both got a unit of Questors, so we've got a teleport with them. So, could be very easy to score for both sides. So any little advantage we can get could be a big deal. So I've got these 4 objectives now. Okay, into the next round. I've taken the lead by 2 points. My opponent wins the priority again. And if I'd won the priority, would I have taken the turn? I don't know, because I wouldn't have been able to do a battle tactic. And I don't know if I would have accomplished much. Because Karazai probably would have got into the Storm Coven and killed them. But that's going to do me no good whatsoever when I'm being charged by Reclusians and Prosecutors at the same time. So I don't think I could have accomplished that much by taking the double turn, so I probably wouldn't have done. And if you look at the distance I'm from the enemy, all the hard-hitting units are really far away anyway, so I don't mind if they go next. So my opponent goes for attack on 2 fronts, take 2 objectives, one of which had to be under my control at the start. So there's an enemy purple sun out, so we could have a purple sun off at some point. You can see the Questors teleport onto this objective next to my teleport chamber, and so do the Storm Coven. The Questors use their innate teleport ability, and the Storm Coven move to in range of their teleport chamber to get to mine. The Reclusians and the Prosecutors are closing in on my long strikes. And I'm not too worried about that. You can see the Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker has got onto this objective as well. And with my covering fire, I whittle down the Prosecutors a little bit. But they do make their charge. And they kill off some of the long strikes, not all of them. And the Reclusians failed their charge. So I can live with this situation. Not the worst, but my opponent is going to score good points there. He's going to score 10. So, onto my turn. I also go for attack on two fronts, take two objectives off the enemy. So I bring in a fresh unit of 3 Palladors with a command point. So they're going to try and take this one from the Questors. Karazai is heading into the centre, and I've got the Praetors onto this objective. And the long strikes, with their piling in combat with the Prosecutors, end up on this objective here. And I've also teleported my Questors onto this one in the middle, and also got my Wizard teleported onto the other one up there. So, I now have 4 objectives. I've got all 4 of these, and the enemy death bundle is between all of them, so they can't spread out and take them all. I think I still have this objective here as well. So I'm feeling good about the objective game. I've got more mobility at this stage of the game. My opponent is now nowhere near his teleport chamber, and the Questors have already used their teleport, so there's no enemy teleports coming anytime soon. I think a fresh unit can still be brought back to life at some point, though. I've got more options, though, because I've actually got units that are near my teleportarium, for example, the Praetors. You can see I had Finest Hour on them, because if we go back, you'll see, let's have a look who was there. So the Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker was there, and now he's not. So managed to get into him and kill him. So I get 10 points as well. So I'm maintaining that tiny, slender lead. Turn 4 for my opponent. Slay the Entourage is chosen. And my opponent would like to kill these long strikes, which should be very easy. Karazai has -1 charge dice cast on him by the enemy Storm Coven. And I countercast -1 charge dice onto the Reclusians. Then you can see everyone piles in and murders the 2 remaining long strikes, so that is a battle tactic. And at this point, we are actually getting very short on time in the round, so I think we just haven't been playing fast enough up to this point, or maybe we were too comfortable and there was too much banter going on. So my opponent scores 8 for that round, because, let's have a look at the wide shot, so does not own more objectives than me, because I've still got these 3 up here, and possibly this one as well. So into my turn 4. I go for Slay the Entourage, and all I have to kill is these 2 Questors. So Karazai goes in there, stays away from the Death Blob in doing so, keep the Praetors up with him, and then throw the Palladors in there as well. So not only am I going to kill them for a tactic, I'm also going to take this objective. So that puts me in quite a comfortable position with another 10-point round. So, into the next turn. So the next turns, we don't really play them out properly because we haven't got time. So what we do, as often happens in Age of Sigmar, you just talk through what you're going to do in the turns, and then if there's any crucial dice rolls related to scoring tactics or denying things, then you'll make those rolls and nothing else. So you just kind of roughly push a unit where it's going to go, and then have a look and see if there's anything your opponent can do to counter it, and then work from there. Just to get it done faster so we can actually finish all the turns. So, what my opponent wants to do is, let's see, which battle tactic did my opponent do? So I think I did Reclaim the Realms. I think my opponent might have done it as well, actually. So there's long strikes up there who teleported. There's Bastion in this one. There's loads of units there and there. So I go for the same thing in my turn. So all I have to do is Put my Palladors in there. Make sure they don't get killed. The Questors just nudge themselves there, just in case covering fire kills the Palladors. Karazai needs to stay down here on his own. And I teleport my one Praetor through the teleport chamber into the bottom right-hand corner, miles from the enemy, so he's safe. And then over here, we determine... Let me have a look at the photos. So we were looking at this, and my wizard can charge this piece of terrain. So they're just like gently, not really measuring too precisely, just push him over there. That's where he's going to be. And then my opponent says, well, I could try and countercharge you to try and like tie up both these units to deny the battle tactic. But realistically, these guys are obviously going to try and separate as much as possible. So you can see the Vigilors here. They can move. So they would either charge into the Prosecutors so that the wizard is safe up there, or they can auto-run in that direction. If we look at the distance between these two units. So the Vigilors can auto-run 11 inches over here. The wizard can go there, and then charge the terrain piece to end up all the way around here. And then the space is just too big, because they're already like 3 inches apart. Plus 11, plus whatever he travels. And the, let's see how many Prosecutors got rallied. So they got up to 5, so the space that they could occupy wouldn't be enough to stretch between the units with that distance. So no denying of that. And I think my Praetors, did I rally one back? I think so. So there you go. So at the end of all that, we get some 8-point turns at the end. I get one as well. And that means it is a very small win for me. Let me just check the final score here on the page. 46-44. So very, very close. The one thing that did it for me in the end was just being slightly more aggressive at taking objectives, I think, because I was able to do that with the slight mobility edge I had over the enemy. And I mostly avoided this death bundle, and they were kind of really compact, dominating when they got a chance to attack something, but I mostly just avoided them and tried to hop on objectives and score tactics. So in the end, it just about worked out. Into round 2, the Vice. So let me pull up this page here. So this one is terrible for Questors. Indigent Indigator says, your Stormreach portal might be the prettiest thing on the table. I love that gold. It's a very nice model, actually. I don't normally enjoy painting terrain that much because it's just massive surface areas, but that one was okay. Wasn't too bad at all to paint. So the Vice, terrible for Quest of Soulsworn. Why? Because you have to pick an objective that's on the table, so you have to pick one of these two. Then at the end of turn 1, they disappear and turn into different objectives. So, yeah, that's not great. I wouldn't mind actually some kind of errata, where if you're playing the Vice, then, for example, if you pick this as the quest-marked objective, when it disappears, the quest-marked objective becomes this one, which then becomes this one. I think that would be cool, and it would still leave the battle plans where the enemy can choose to delete the quest-marked objective. So I don't think you need to write anything in there about that. I don't think you should be able to then pick another one. But I do like the idea of the Vice. The quest-marked objective just moves along the path that you've chosen, rather than just disappearing at the end of turn 1. But there are abilities in the game tied to the battlefield that don't translate across all battle plans. For example, certain armies have bonuses when they're in their own territory, and some of them only have very small territory in the corner. So there is a little bit of imbalance based on the battle plan. So, what are we up against here? The vile, evil, bloodthirsty forces of Khorne. And by the way, before we even start this, the greatest idea I've ever had, the one Khorne unit that's missing that would transform them, visually, why don't Khorne have a unit of blood spurters? And by that I mean it's a unit that have a blood hose that they just hose the enemy down with blood, which rather than doing massive damage, that then gives other Khorne units bonuses against them, maybe like +1 to charge, +1 to hit or something, because they've seen all this blood everywhere and they go into a frenzy. Wouldn't that be cool? I might as well go into my rant about Khorne as well, because it's been a couple of editions now where they've designed them in a very unthematic manner. In the previous edition, my issue with Khorne was that you could use the Blood Tithe to prevent combat. So how that worked was, you could use it to move in the hero phase. and you could move into combat. So if you had a crummy little hero, you could move in the enemy hero phase into combat with their big monster and stop it charging your big unit. And for some reason, the Blood God is cool with this happening, despite it denying the big battle between a monster and a load of crazed Khorne dudes that would be a really cool blood fest. But Khorne apparently doesn't care that you just sacrifice one tiny priest, for instance, to deny loads of other bloodshed. That's cool with the Blood God. And in this edition, the problem is, you can, in the movement phase, including the enemy movement phase, you can do the similar thing. You can move 3 inches for Blood Tithe, but you can use it to move away from the enemy, which you can combine with redeploy. So how does Khorne feel about that? That this tithe of blood, he's then bestowing gifts onto these followers, and they're using them to run away from the enemy. I don't know if Khorne would be cool with that. I think it could be made thematic with minor tweaks. For example, you have to use it to get closer to the enemy, or if you use it to move away from the enemy, then you take massive damage, for example, but maybe not enough to kill you, so under some circumstances it's still worth doing, but there would be the Khorne theme in there because you're being punished for avoiding combat. Anyway, there's the end of that rant, for now. I don't think it makes them horrifically overpowered or anything, by the way. I just think it's not very thematic. So let's go into the Khorne list. Khorne cares not from whence the blood spurts. Correct, he just cares that there's blood, so it's odd that you have abilities that deny the spurting of blood as a force of Khorne. So, this is a lot of Juggernauts. That's a lot of 2+ save units. What else has a 2+ save in Age of Sigmar version 4? Shield Annihilators, Juggernauts, what else? I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. There's probably a few more units though. Let me know in the chat if you know of anything else with a 2+ save. I think this could be an issue for my army because I don't have access to a lot of Rend. I've got lots of Rend 1. Most of my units are Rend 1. You think about the Questors, the Palladors, the Vigilors and the Praetors. Everything they do is Rend 1. The Long Strikes and Karazai are sources of Rend 2, but that's the best I can do. Except against infantry with Karazai, and Juggernauts obviously are not infantry, they are cavalry. So apparently Steam Tanks and the Bastiladon have a 2+ save as well. Nice. It makes sense for those two units, definitely. There are some other units out there that I think look as if they should have a 2+ save, but maybe don't. And there are some that look like they should have a vastly inferior save to other units, but have a great save. Like, for example, I don't know why Dracodian Guard have the same save as Palladors, when clearly the Dracodian Guard have got scaly flesh, they're covered in armour, and the Palladors are just naked bird horses. Okay, so what have we got in this Force of Khorne, other than 1,000 Juggernauts? And then I'll go back and talk about my tactics in a moment. So, we've got a Slaughter Priest somewhere. I think he's hanging out by this. So when he gets into the shrine, then there are like bonuses to prayers and that kind of thing. And magic denial. There is another Slaughter Priest who is over here behind these Juggernauts. There is a unit of Mighty Skull Crushers, which I think is the Juggernaut unit. That's reinforced. And in the other regiment, there's 2 units of Blood Reavers, who are the infantry units. And more Mighty Skull Crushers, also reinforced. And then in the next regiment, so there's 3 drops. The next one has a Bloodstoker, who is this guy here with the whips. And then 2 units of Skull Crushers, which are not reinforced. So there are 2 units of 6 Juggernauts and 2 units of 3. That is a lot of Juggernaut. You can see unit 3 out on the flank there. So let's go back to the wide shot. I don't know how I would do in a straight up fight against this. It could be a problem. I don't have the Rend necessarily to get through everything. And they're obviously very scary. When I look at cavalry, I think, okay, they're probably better on the charge, so maybe I hit them first. On the other hand, we do have to start off quite far apart if we want to score, but as the game goes on, we're going to be condensed into this central area. I don't know if I like the sound of that because I'm not going to be able to escape from all these units. So, what I would like to do is hit some of them early, and take them out where I can early in the game, try and score points while the objectives are numerous. Because it's possible that this area could have just been swamped with juggernauts and I don't have the tools to get through them at the end of the game, so it might be a struggle to score, depending where the enemy go. So if they want to just hog the centre, then I'll kind of skirt around the edges to start with, try and kill what I can, and score the points, try and build up a lead, before it becomes a bit of a war of attrition in the middle later on. Nicholas says, Andy, these are great as always, looking forward to your Age of Sigmar Stormcast Eternals videos. Yes, and I can actually tell you that this event has filled me with more Stormcast enthusiasm than any other. So it's not only just using Karazai and the Palladors, it's also seeing the other Stormcast Eternal armies and how they play and different units, some of which I already have that I can use and combo together. Just different things I want to try out. I want to try Krondis with Palladors at some point because he combos pretty well because he can reduce enemy armor saves, which helps them since all their attacks are just rend 1. So there's so much stuff I want to try now. And I think just adding a couple of units, sprinkling a few things in, like I've added the Storm Coven, and you can see one of them is being used as the Knight Arcanum in this list. Adding the Questors, adding the Palladors, and using the Judicators as the Vigilors has just added so many more options and combos to my list building, so I'm not locked into anything. I've got so many things that are all playable. I've got Annihilators, I've got Dracothian Guard, which I don't think are the best at the moment. I think Palladors give you a lot more value of the number of wounds and the speed, which is important in this game. So, I want to pick things off around the edges, rather than dealing with all the meat in the middle. Let's see how it goes. So, I am going first. No, I'm not. I give away the first turn to Khorne. So you can see there, Chaos Battle Tactics, it says. So take the flanks. A very easy one. The two small units of Juggernauts are going to take that. Very easy. They were set up for it already, and they've all marched forward. Now, this terrain is helpful to me because it's going to block these units from supporting each other. I want to isolate them. I don't want to get pinned down fighting multiple units, because some of my debuffs, for example, Karazai picks a unit to put -1 attack onto. So if you're fighting multiple units, you can only pick one of them. But cavalry are actually the dream here, because I'm always going for the bodyguard, honor guard ability on the praetors, which means that enemy units are going to have less attacks even further. So cavalry that often have 3 attacks, you can reduce one of those units to 1 attack each on the riders. So that could be a big deal. And the only issue with that is that you can't charge and still use that ability. So you have to park Karazai somewhere and then get the praetors in range and then wait for the enemy to come to you, or use it in subsequent rounds. So my opponent just moves up, has objectives, scores 8. Nice and easy. Holds an objective. Holds the 2 corner objectives. We haven't put tokens down for them. You can see my Palladors and the Questors are in the corners just so they're towing onto the corner objectives, because these ones aren't active yet. We're only in the corners until the end of round 1. So, turn 1 for me. I go for Do Not Waver. So, controversial. 2 or more friendly units fight, no units die. I'm confident in pulling this one off. So the Questors just moving in a bit because that objective is about to disappear. So they're moving and towing onto this one. The base should be on there, but I think it slid off before the photo. So I want to be on this one in case I don't go first in the second battle round. I want to be on objectives to stop the enemy getting easy points. Over on this side, I get the Palladors and Karazai into the Juggernauts over there, kill them utterly, which means I get my battle tactic because 2 units fought, nobody died, and I'm on the 2 corner objectives. So, there we go. 8 points for me as well. And you can see I've got a big, very hard-hitting area over here. I did move Karazai out of range of the praetors, which I felt was kind of safe to do at this moment, because the enemy are all the way over there. And I've also got the opportunity, if the enemy starts coming this way, I've got the chance to redeploy the praetors to hopefully within range to get one of those abilities, because you have to get within 6 to do the bodyguard honor guard ability, and within 3 to get the ward save. I've also got Palladors there for potential counter charges to protect him as well, and I've thrown out a purple sun there just to kind of create a bit of a choke point, stop the enemy just walking through here towards my vulnerable centre where I've got my wizard and the Questors, but mainly these objectives. So, my opponent wins priority and goes for attack on 2 fronts, so take 2 objectives, one of which was held by the enemy. Now, I think that actually, let's see, controlled by your opponent at the start of the turn. I don't know. Should that be allowed? Do I count as controlling this at the start of the turn because I'm on it when it appears? Maybe. Yeah, I think that is okay, actually. That sounds right to me. I was thinking that maybe it wouldn't become mine until the end of the turn. But I think if you start on the objective, don't you control it at that point? Interesting. Someone let me know exactly how that works, because I know if you start on an objective and then move off it, it still counts as you controlling it. Is that only at deployment? Okay, interesting then. So maybe that shouldn't be an eligible battle tactic at this point. Because, well, we both got it wrong anyway, if that's the case. We've got Adam Bloom on the case, going to check that for sure. We've got Remington Steele in the chat. Obviously, Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer Old World legend, Mr. Remington himself, who you'll be seeing pretty soon on this channel again on an Old World battle report. You'll be hearing those soothing Remington tones. Okay, so either way, whether it's supposed to be eligible or not as a battle tactic here, it is taken. Let's see. Adam says at the start of the first battle round, at the end of each turn. Okay then, there you go. So technically this battle tactic shouldn't be possible at this stage, but there were other ones available. So it was only the fact that we thought this one was available that it was chosen. So it's not going to make a huge deal of difference because another one could have been picked. So loads of Juggernauts converging on the Questors. And all the Blood Reavers heading out. The endless, or the manifestations, because they're not endless spells, because they're priestly invocations, they are actually screening out my teleports, preventing me from landing in any dodgy positions and on enemy objectives, for example. And these guys are on this objective now. So, one unit of Juggernauts makes it into the Questors. You can see that I redeployed, but not very far away. And it was enough, I think, to prevent this unit reaching me. The other Juggernauts in the middle decide they're going to just slash at the purple sun because they want to get rid of it. However, look at this. So Karazai goes for a big countercharge on the Blood Reavers. I saw it as a great opportunity here to try and deny a battle tactic. Because, let's have a look. So Karazai makes the charge. What these invocations could have actually done is gone and charged Karazai to lock him down. But my opponent maybe thought it was too far. But it was a 10-inch, and I thought it was a great opportunity to try and stop that battle tactic, because if we look at where my opponent's units are, let's see. So, or maybe not to shut down a battle tactic, but maybe to deny holding more objectives than me. So it's going to shut down 2 points, basically. Because he's got these two, but not these two now. So won't have more points than me. Let's see what we put it down as. So maybe we only put it down as 4-point turn, so we put that down as a battle tactic being denied. So actually, let's go back and make sure I'm looking at the right battle tactic here. Attack on 2 fronts, take 2 objectives that you do not control at the start of your turn. At least one of those objectives was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn. Yeah, so did we just make a complete mess of this then? And kind of misunderstood the rules, or misunderstood which battle tactic we were doing? I think maybe I've marked the wrong one. I think I have. Maybe it's not attack on 2 fronts he was going for. Maybe it was actually do not waver. That would make a lot of sense here. But I think I've just put the dice next to the wrong one. So maybe, I don't know whether I just put the dice in the wrong place or my opponent just said the wrong battle tactic out loud and then marked a different one off. But either way, so the fact that Karazai killed those Blood Reavers means that that is a unit that's been killed, which would have denied the battle tactic successfully, because these guys were fighting the Purple Sun, so that counts as combat, and these Juggernauts got into the Questors, which also counts as combat. And you can see they did actually kill them. Which is sad. And the Questors are dead. So denied the battle tactic via killing the Blood Reavers. Okay, so I've now got the advantage into my turn 2. I go for take their land, so it's a very easy one. I just want to take the enemy faction terrain with Karazai. So I put Finest Hour on Karazai because the plan was... Let me go back a second. I actually thought I wanted to go and kill... Or maybe it's this piece of terrain I chose here. Because what I want to do is go over here, charge the Juggernauts, kill them with Karazai. But obviously they're Khorne, so they can use a Blood Tithe point. You can see the Blood Tithe building up over there somewhere. I can't remember which dice it is. It might be that one. One of them's command points, one of them's Blood Tithe, I think. So they can use that to move 3 away, then redeploy, run away from Karazai, which I'm not that concerned about. Because if they're running away, that means we're not fighting, and the less time we spend fighting, the better that is for me as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not confident I'm going to kill them with only rend of 2 on Karazai and rend 1 on most other things. So, I'm taking this bit of land here. So Karazai is going to stand on it. I've brought in my long strikes and my vigilors because I think, you know what, I'm just going to start blasting these juggernauts. And I do. I brought the Palladors over as well. The Praetors. Everyone was getting ready to attack, but the enemy redeployed 6 inches and then used a Blood Tithe point to move over here. So they're just miles away now. So I do some good shooting at them though. And I also have... Let's see, so I've got 2 objectives, and I'll get my tactic for this bit of land here, which I was going to take with the Palladors had Karazai been able to charge them. But I think they just ran away. So, you can see my terrain is getting beaten up a little bit by the Juggernauts. And 8 points for me, so just securing that lead that I've established through that battle tactic denial. And my opponent goes first in round 3, with the winning the priority goes for Ordained Charge. So, pick an objective. You must complete 2 charges, and one of the units that charged has to control that objective at the end and be contesting it. So, it's pretty obvious the Juggernauts want to attack my shooting units now. And you may think this was a bit suicidal, but I was thinking that I would do a lot more damage than I actually did with my shooting into the Juggernauts. And then I had my wizard here so that I could countercast -1 charge dice onto one of them. Which I was hoping would make it very hard for them to reach me, and then I would covering fire at them, and that was going to be a whole thing. But the other reason is that if I've got them kind of consolidated here, if there's 2 units of Juggernauts, 1 there and like 1 there, they don't want to run away from me anymore. Because the centre's going to be up for grabs soon. So if I start coming this way with Karazai holding that point there with his bodyguard, then they're going to have to come and get me. And I'm going to be able to charge them and still then stay on it with the, for example, the Palladors could touch it. I could keep the Praetors on it and charge Karazai here. Get into combat with everybody, lock them down, and then hold the middle objective. So I'm not too concerned if my shooter units die now, because I'm looking at the bigger picture with objectives. Covering fire doesn't do much. Long strikes being a bit disappointing at the moment. I do redeploy them as well, which is going to make the charging a bit more difficult, except they can still charge into the faction terrain, so really it isn't. So it was a waste of a point, really. The burning... what's this called? Some kind of burning axe invocation is attacking Karazai. The long strikes are going to get whomped, probably, and they do. The Vigilors are hanging in, though, and my wizard is hanging in there. And Karazai kills the invocation. So, we are going into my turn 3. And the Khorne pick up 10 points that round for holding, let's see, 1, 2, 3 objectives. So, what am I going to do about that? My plan is, because it's my turn 3 next, I've got 1 turn of these objectives being active. Karazai, I've got 2 options. He can either just sit in the centre and ignore scoring for this round, and then wait for the enemy to come at me. But what I really want to do is score over here on this objective and get some points. And I'm going to throw the Palladors into these Juggernauts and try and take this objective as well and preserve the Vigilors. So Palladors coming down here, blast into those Juggernauts, try and kill them. Karazai going off around that side, going there. And the Praetors hanging out near the centre objective, ready to pounce on that when the time comes. I've also got 3 Questors about to enter. I thought about putting 3 Questors onto this objective. My issue with that is that I don't like this unit of Blood Reavers. Because if I go onto that objective with 3 Questors, they can use the Blood Tithe to move 3 inches towards me and then countercharge me, and there's 10 of them, which would be more bodies on there. I don't think the Questors hit hard enough to kill enough of them to take the objective then. Whereas Karazai is very likely to kill them all if they want to come and deal with him. So I want the points now. Then, so in my turn, attack on 2 fronts. So take 2 objectives. At least one of them has to be taken from your opponent. So I want to take this one with the Palladors, so they blast in there. And then Karazai taking this one. So I'm not confident I would have been able to pull that off with the Questors for the reasons I just laid out. However, once I did it, I was regretting it immediately and thought, this is kind of short-term thinking here, because what I actually think I should be doing is just piling into the centre, writing off this round a little bit, and just focusing on turn 4 and 5 and trying to hold this middle here. So if I get Karazai into a position where he's kind of hanging off the middle and just put the Praetors behind him, I think he's going to be very tough to shift, because you're going to have to charge him. So he's not charged, so I get the double bodyguard ability, so he's going to get his 5+ ward, they're going to put -1 attack, and he's got his -1 attack ability. So I think that would be pretty solid end game, having Karazai in the middle. Palladors, I'm finding they just bounce off these Juggernauts mostly, with their rend of 1. And when my opponent has all-out defense as well, so they're still on 2+ saves, it's just nothing is going through. So they're not. It's not a great matchup for them, the Palladors, sadly. So maybe they could have been used just flooding the centre as well, because they're a big blob of wounds that the enemy would also struggle to get through. Because there's 6 of them, there is 30 wounds in there. So that is a significant amount of wounds. So, into turn 4. And actually, I think it is Chaos going, but it does say Order up there. So my opponent is going for take their land, and you can see that the Priest is generating some PP, and also has taken some damage. I think that's prayer points there, and that's the wounds. So, Khorne hit the middle objective, which is now active, because we're in battle round number 4, and I'm really regretting not putting Karazai there now. So, my hope to deny some points here is to countercharge with the Praetors, because you get a bonus 2 points if there are no enemies within 6 inches, or within... Is it within 6 of the centre objective? Something like that. So you get a bonus 2 points for that, to make up for the fact there's only 1 objective, so you can't hold 2 objectives anymore. So to keep it so you can get 10 in each round, you have to keep all the enemies away from the middle, basically. So countercharge the Praetors in there, hope they can survive 1 round, deny some points, then get Karazai in here. And I've also got them locked down in combat then, so they can't move away from me. The Vigilors are killed, but the Palladors are... They're winning this fight against the Juggernauts here very slowly, but it's not ideal. So, all-out defense on the Praetors. Just keep them alive to deny some points. And I actually do deny those 2 points because of it. So, what's my plan next? Karazai wants to come down here and massacre. And the Palladors, they're tempted to get out of combat, work their way around here, and then try and charge into these guys in the middle instead of fighting these 2 chumps that aren't on an objective anymore, because these 4 have been switched off now. So, so my land has been taken. On my turn, I go for take the flanks, which I'm set up for because I decide actually the Questors I brought down earlier are in position to do that. The Palladors can go and do it, because there's not enough space really for them to do what I want. Because if I move them around there to charge here, these guys could move 3 inches and get into combat with me for 1 blood tithe, or I wouldn't be threatening the objective either. So Karazai comes down here. You'll see that the Praetors are dead. That is a blood tithe ability, I think, that just does loads of mortal wounds to them, so they're just dead from blood tithe. So I've got my battle tactic, but nothing else by the looks of it. And Karazai, I think, needed a 6-inch charge to get in there, and rolled 5. Palladors happily chilling out, scoring me the battle tactic though. So I only score 4 points for the round, because I've got a battle tactic, but nothing on the objectives. Chaos first in round 5, so they're going to be able to score again. Piling everyone onto the objective, getting ready to charge Karazai. These 2 are going to try and shut down the Palladors. And just a big encirclement of Karazai with the Juggernauts now. He's starting to take damage. More damage as more of them activate. Down to 3 wounds, with all-out defense keeping him just alive for the turn. So, he's denying 2 points from being within 6 of there, so it's going to be an 8-point turn again, turn 5. So, here's the situation. If I get a 10-point turn, I win the game. That's not going to happen, because I feel like I've messed up a bit here in the middle by allowing the enemy to get on there first. If I get an 8-point turn, it's a draw. So, how do I do that? I need to take the centre objective. I need to do a battle tactic. So, how am I going to do that? I go for Slay the Tyrant. That's the only one I think is doable at the moment. So, the one I'm looking at, there's 2 heroes there. They can't both redeploy. One of them can redeploy, one of them can use the Blood Tithe to move away 3 inches. So, the Palladors are thankfully not in combat here, so I'm going to move them all the way down here, staying 3 inches away from the Juggernauts, obviously, but they're locked in combat, so they can't deny this. So I'll get to about there, leaving me a charge on them. I'm going to teleport the Questors down here to give me another angle of approach. So if they redeploy in that direction, it's still going to be a reasonably long charge, but the reason I'm slightly confident is because there are other nearby units. So if I don't roll high enough on the charge, I can then charge as far as possible into those units and then pile in towards the characters. So if the Palladors are here, let's say I roll 7 on the charge and the heroes are here, I would then get to here and then be able to pile in 3 inches and maybe get some of them attacking the heroes by activating them first, because that's the only thing that really matters. So let's see how it plays out. Also, when Karazai strikes now, he has quite a significant output because he's almost dead, so he gets 2 bonus attacks on each of his weapons. So let's see how it goes. Well, the Questors, they landed, they made their charge into the units, you can see these 2 heroes have moved away from me as much as possible. Actually, I don't think that guy's a hero. So they moved away from me as much as possible. The Questors made their charge into this unit, Blood Reavers, and then used their pile-in to get into range of one of the priests and killed him. So there is the battle tactic secured. The Palladors then get in as well. And with Karazai, between Karazai and the Palladors, they managed to obliterate most of those Juggernauts. And the reason that happened is because my opponent ran out of command points. So that is a valid strategy, actually, is to get your opponent to spend their command points. If their defense is obscenely high, and you don't do any damage if they all-out defense, you need to find a way to get those command points gone. So the fact that there was so much intricate stuff going on and it was such a tight ending to the game meant that my opponent did run out of them. So you can see, immediately, as soon as there's no all-out defense, the Juggernauts just start crumbling from the Rend 2 on Karazai, and even the Rend 1 on the Palladors was doing good damage as well, without that all-out defense adding to their save. So, got the battle tactic, secured the objective, which means I get an 8-point turn, which means it's a draw. So I think I'm fairly happy with that. I think you can see the difference, though, because the Juggernauts were just dominating the table until they ran out of command points, and then I just slaughtered them. So it was looking really bad at one point. There were loads of Juggernauts left. I was being whittled down. And I think I could have maybe seized the centre a bit better in this game. Not the battle tactic, but just purely putting units there defensively. I think Karazai should have gone there earlier rather than trying to take this. Although, I did end up denying the 2 points for having the Praetors within range of this anyway. So, I don't know whether it would have helped that much, because the enemy would have been able to get enough models on there probably to still take the objective unless I pile up everything behind it, in which case I get encircled by other Juggernauts because I'm not using the Palladors to pin them. So probably I should have used Karazai in the centre to lock that down a bit better. But in the end, happy with the draw. I think that's a very difficult matchup. Arguably for both sides, actually. Because neither side has that much rend, and both sides have good armour. And a good chunk of wounds in some of those units as well. But I think it's particularly bad for the Stormcast that don't have a lot of mortal wound output in these units that I've taken, and they also lack in rend. So quite happy with the draw there. Moving on to the next round, shifting objectives. So as you can see, there are 3 objectives down the middle, and in each round, one of them will become primary and worth more. And if you're the underdog, you can force the active player to re-roll, picking which one is the primary objective for the battle round. Okay, and what's this? Do my eyes deceive me? Has a Fire Slayer player turned up at the TSN? That's point 1. Point 2, they're running Fire Slayer infantry. I didn't think they existed since 1st and 2nd edition. I remember back in the good old days when you'd see those massive Fire Slayer infantry blobs that had the ward save and they could get extra attacks and all kinds of horrible things. And I'm pretty sure, was it early version 1 when the Fire Slayers came out? It was Fire Slayer infantry and Bone Splitters infantry that were dominating for a while. I'm sure I remember those days on the very early Warhammer TV live streams of games. But last edition, you only ever saw the Magmadroth lists because they were just so good, and now apparently they're not good at all. So we're back to Fire Slayer infantry, which is great to see because they're a very cool looking army, even though all the units do look basically the same. So hopefully they get some visual variety in their next book. They get some more units because they've already introduced baby Magmadroths. They've got full-size Magmadroths. Why can't they have teenage Magmadroth cavalry? That would be some nice visual variety, and Magmadroths are just one of the coolest things in the game anyway. So, I'm just going to pull up this list before I start going through it all. So, what have we got? I've got some better close-ups of this, I think, later when I take pictures of all the armies as well, because this was very well painted. I especially like, obviously, the orange highlighted hair, which is similar, of course, to the old world Dwarf Slayers, which obviously I'm a fan of. So, the name of the list is It's Gotrek Time. So Gotrek is in there, and he's quite terrifying with a 3+ ward save. If you roll remotely well for him, he could just survive the entire game on the back of a 3+ ward save. So he's terrifying. It's 4 drops though. So we've got, who have we got over here? What's the name of this unit? Let's have a look. Because it's the unit that's got a baby Magmadroth in there, and they've got all different variety of weaponry. So is it a Warcry Warband? So we've got, let's have a look at the various units. We've got an Auric Rune Master. Now, I'm not going to be able to tell you entirely which unit is which with any certainty, but there's Gotrek. There he is. That's probably the Rune Master. Gonna guess that's the Rune Master. There's a Grimwrath Berserker, who is, I'm gonna guess, this one. Okay, that's my best guess. There are 2 units in this regiment with them. There's Volkite Berserkers with bladed sling shields. And I'm gonna guess that's them because they've got shields. Look at that. Am I doing well? Let me know. And then in the other regiment, there's a Rune Smiter, who is, I don't know, that could even be him. I have no idea. Ooh, maybe it's the guy that's off the table is one of them, because they can pop up. Then we've got, let's see, we've got a unit of Hearthguard Berserkers with Berserker Broadaxes. So I'm going to guess we're looking at this unit here, because they've got massive axes. Then we've got another Auric Rune Smiter with Hearthguard Berserkers with Berserker Broadaxes, again, also reinforced. So, are they off the table? Or is it just, I think it's just these 2 units, actually. Yes, they're the fighty ones. Then we've also got Vulcan Flame Seekers, which are the shooty units, which I think are off the table at the start. Then, what else have we got? I think that's it. So we've got loads of infantry units. We've got some of them that are starting off the table that could appear later. Look at that. Very scary. We've got some invocations looking very fiery. So what's my plan here? Well, these infantry units, I think Karazai would make mincemeat of them because they don't have a huge amount of attacks each. So with my bodyguard nearby, I can potentially get them down, all of them down to 1 attack, which is good. Let's see. We've got in the chat, pity the Fire Slayers weren't better received. Maybe one day they'll get some much needed reinforcements, but I'm not holding my breath. I think the Fire Slayers have definitely been neglected. They're in the same boat as the Caradron Overlords when it comes to releases, where they get a new book and they'll say, hey, guess what? As a treat, you can have a new foot hero that you can't feasibly fit into a list. So what kind of foot hero could they have? I don't think the Fire Slayers have had a rune smelter. That's one they haven't had, so they can get a book and a rune smelter. How about that? I don't know what bonus that hero would give, but it would be underwhelming. So, Karazai, I think, will do well against the infantry. The fact that there's 3 objectives means that it doesn't matter that my opponent has lots of units. They're going to be able to consolidate all of them into a small area, which I don't like, because they're quite slow, obviously. They're just little Fire Slayers with their tiny little dwarven legs. I can't use too many teleport shenanigans to take objectives in this one, which I think is bad. On the plus side, the territory is tiny, and Fire Slayers get +1 to save while in friendly territory. I predict they'll be spending exactly 0 turns of this game in friendly territory, because immediately they're going to want these objectives, so why would they sit back there and lose just to get +1 save when you're not even fighting? Gotrek, I'm obviously terrified of. I think he would annihilate most of my units, potentially, because he can fight twice as well, which is very scary. So if he's going to fight anyone, I feel like Karazai has the best chance of killing him, because I can just do massive damage with Karazai. And it would also reduce Gotrek's attacks as well, slightly, with Karazai's abilities. Other than that, Palladors potentially doing hit-and-run attacks on the Fire Slayers units. Their saves aren't great. They do have access to some ward saves. We'll see. I'm not too confident. They've got bodies to swamp objectives, so it depends if I can chew through them fast enough. I feel good about Karazai dealing with them. Palladors, maybe, but mainly Karazai is the one I'm confident in here. Long strikes, I think, will do a good job, weirdly enough, against mass infantry. I think the Ren 2 is going to be enough to get through their armour, and they don't have a lot of wounds each, so I think maybe they could do some work. Okay, so I've got the Vigilors off the table, I've got the Praetors off the table, because the enemy has very little ranged threat. So I don't feel that they need to be on the table yet. And I've got my long strikes on the table because what I can do, because the territory is so small, I can immediately do take the flanks early in the game by just moving them up. And they're not going to want to engage the enemy until they spread out, and I can just hit one of them without the threat of another unit coming to get me. The Palladors are also in position for take the flanks, which I can get in turn 1 as well. However, I am going to have the choice of going first, but wild twist, I am going to take the turn. Who could have foreseen that? I've set up for take the flanks, so I'm going to take the flanks, which also means I can move onto all the objectives and invite my opponent onto me. So I've got the purple sun right there to kind of force the enemy into a smaller area to attack Karazai, hopefully. And also, if they get in there next to the sun, they're going to be taking -1 to their save as well, and they would have to fight it potentially. Palladors are going to hang back until the enemy come and take this objective. This is the primary, by the way, for the battle round. So I've put my wizard teleported, I think, on there. And then the Questors have moved, so they're towing onto their quest-marked objective. Karazai holding the centre with his bodyguard. Long strikes just moved up a little bit, or take the flanks with the Palladors. So, I've laid down the gauntlet. Fire Slayers, would you like to come and attack Karazai? The Questors aren't being quite so brave because they're terrified of Gotrek. I think he would be a bad matchup for them. They will probably not kill him. So, got all the objectives, got my quest marks objectives, so they've got their 5+ ward save active. So, 10 points. My opponent also goes for take the flanks, which was set up quite easily. You can see that this unit, whose name, I can't even remember which unit this is. The unit that has a baby Magmadroth in it. I assume it's on the list, and I'm just totally missing it here. Which unit is that? I don't know. Because in one regiment we've got Flame Seekers. Is it the Flame Seekers? Are they not the shooty ones? Oh no, yeah, they are the Flame Seekers. I can see 2 of them. What's the name of the shooty unit then? You know what? I don't know. They're all fire slayers. They're on fire. They've got orange hair. They've got gold pressed into their skin. Let's just treat them as if they're all the same. So they've popped up behind me, and they've got -1 for me to wound them, which is not very nice. And you can see the shooty ones, whose names I can't remember. I'm looking at the list. I don't see which unit that is. Is that the Hearthguard? The shooty ones? It could well be, you know. So I'm going to assume that's the Hearthguard. So they're going to try and kill my wizard, which shouldn't have actually been possible because I forgot I had Mirror Shield, so you shouldn't be able to shoot me there, Fire Slayers. But again, I just forget all the upgrades that I put on my hero. Gotrek is advancing. Terrifying. Extremely terrifying. So I redeploy my long strikes to make this a very difficult charge into them, so hopefully they just have to attack the Questors, if anybody. And the wizard gets killed because I forgot I had Mirror Shield. But obviously my opponent wouldn't have positioned in such a way to attack the wizard in the first place, would have done something different. So I covering fire with the long strikes and whittle down heavily this unit of Flame Seekers. But the 4 of them do decide they're going to attack the Questors anyway. And I think this is Rune Smiter who popped down with them, decides to attack my faction terrain, which is very mean-spirited. What did it ever do to you? It's just a building. Then we've got 1 unit of Berserkers into Karazai. No one else succeeds with their charge, but you can see the Purple Sun has been banished. But I'm feeling pretty good about this. I've got all that defense up. The Questors make short work of the Flame Seekers, which I'm happy about. My terrain takes some wounds. And Karazai takes 2 damage and then absolutely wipes the floor with the Berserkers. He killed some of them with his Rampage as well, because there's 10 guys in there, so I get to throw 10 dice and look for 5s to do mortal wounds. So he killed some of them with that, and then just whomped them. So it's not going very well for the Fire Slayers here. They made a couple of charges, and both units have been either utterly wiped out or almost wiped out. So 4 points for the enemy. So just take the flanks, but no objectives. So into turn 2, and my opponent is now 6 points behind. So the new rules come into effect here. My opponent can now take the double turn with no penalty. So my opponent is able to choose a battle tactic, which is take their land, which is very easy because, look, he's already on the faction terrain. And even moves further away so I can't countercharge to deny that as well. And then we've got these guys with these are the Berserkers with the sling shields. They're moving up towards me. Gotrek is moving in. He's going to look for a charge. We've got more Berserkers eyeing up the Praetors and Karazai, which is obviously quite scary. So, we've got what is the name of this invocation? I can't remember the name of this one, but it's very scary. And in fact, this is cool enough of a model for it to just be a unit, I think. Why can't they have some kind of tunneling magma beast that just tunnels its way around the battlefield? So it's like it flies, but it's actually tunneling. I think that would be a cool unit rather than an invocation. I think it's too cool to be an invocation. So, Gotrek makes the charge into Karazai. This is going to be epic. The invocation makes the charge into Karazai. And no one else does. I don't think all of these units actually attempted to. I think what actually happened is they've been so terrified of Karazai's Rampage that wiped out half this unit before they even got to fight. Maybe not half, but I think it killed like 2 of them. But I think a unit of 10 are so scared of his Rampage, maybe they didn't want to charge. Or maybe the one that's further away failed, so the other one didn't want to also go in, because that means I could just target this unit entirely. Also, they're going to be losing so many attacks fighting Karazai at the moment that maybe my opponent is waiting to try and kill the Praetors first and get rid of the bodyguard ability, get rid of the ward save before committing, after seeing what happened to these 2 and their friends who are now mashed into the ground. But look at this. So Karazai took some damage and then ate Gotrek in 1 round. So the attacks just went through, made Gotrek take like 18 ward saves, and he just failed enough of them and died. There you go, that's how you kill Gotrek. Just throw enough attacks at him, make him make those ward saves, and he's gone. So another bad round for the Fire Slayers, but they do hold 2 objectives. This one is still primary. So that's going to be 6 points. Because, hold on, which battle tactic was it? Oh yeah, it was take my land. So that is secured. The primary objective is secured. This one is not secured though. These 2 are not. Okay, so into my turn. The Palladors blast into the enemy with Finest Hour, an all-out attack. Do some shooting, do some fighting. Karazai with the Questors finish off everyone that was around here. There's just a couple of Berserkers left. I was hoping to kill them with shooting and then charge Karazai into this unit, but alas. The Palladors, though, they're tying up so many units. It's a big blob of wounds with Finest Hour. It's going to be very tough to kill them. And I went for... Let's see here. I went for Do Not Waver. So 2 units fight, no units die. So I've got that, as you can see. Got the Palladors in there, got Karazai fighting. And the Long Strikes have also just blasted away at these Berserkers with the Sling Shields and got them down to 3 models. So I get another decent round, 8 points, stretching the lead a bit. And let's look at the state of the battlefield here. So it's looking very good for me. This unit's almost dead. This unit is exposed now, with Karazai staring at them. The others are in combat with the Palladors. So I'm thinking, if I get the priority, I just take the double and almost table the enemy. And that's exactly what I get the opportunity to do. I win the priority, take the double. Palladors, Karazai make short work of most of these short-legged fellows. Most of them get killed. The Vigilors drop down finally to join in, to shoot one of those units. And 6 points because I can't have a battle tactic because I took the double. But these guys are dead as well, I think. So it's just this lot left. My opponent in turn 3 goes for Slay the Entourage. Wants to try and kill the last Praetor, I think. But does not. And there's a picture of some cakes. So these are the cakes I made for this event. Which were a delightful cashew nut, chocolate and caramel cake. And I do generally make cakes anyway. But these ones were made with... Because I did a vast amount of cake mixture because my housemate Annie of Bad Squiddo Games, it was her birthday today. So I made a cake with that recipe. And the excess mixture I used to make a load of cakes to take to the event as well. So, very nice. They went down very well. Some described them as my best work. Very tasty. So, my opponent at this stage, after not being able to do anything else, decides, you know what, you're just going to kill me. So there's no point going through the motions of trying to move around. We'll just do the important things. I'll see what battle tactics, if any, I can get, and then I'll just delete these units and then try and score my own tactics. So there's not really any more photos of that game, but I do end up scoring maximum points for the rest of the game. My opponent scores 0, obviously, because there's barely anything left. So, thoughts on that game? It was a tough one for the Fire Slayers, having no territory to stay in, because they were losing out on the +1 save. Karazai just tanked a load of attacks and then killed everything. He's really good against infantry. He gets the extra rend against them, and against massed infantry units he gets loads of dice for his rampage for doing the mortal wounds as well. He ate Gotrek in one go, which was great. Palladors did a good job tying things up. I think it just went badly at every step for the Fire Slayers, really. A bit of a nightmare battle plan with the small territory, and Karazai just mopped the floor with them, unfortunately, for the Fire Slayers. So that is a large win for the Stormcast, and the total was 44 victory points to 10. So that puts me on 2 wins and a draw after day 1. Next round, Scorched Earth. Lots of objectives, which I usually like, because I've got some good teleporting units that can bounce around onto objectives. And with Scorched Earth, you can only delete objectives in enemy territory, which means that the quest-marked objective can't be deleted unless I choose to delete it. So that's good for the Questors. What am I up against? It's another Stormcast mirror match, so let me pull open the lists from round 4. Also, my opponent was significantly delayed getting to the venue. No fault of his own, it was delayed trains. which is obviously an issue that we get quite a lot in this country. And, do we want to rant about trains? Because what I think is that the concept of privatised rail networks is deeply flawed, because you can't have competing train companies running against each other on the same line, because there's only one set of tracks between particular locations generally in each direction. So you can't compete. So what's their incentive to be good at running their network? And I'm sure they give them contracts that are way too long probably as well. You know how government generally works. Let's see, Nicholas says, Andy, would you ever take Stardrake and Karazai? Yes, definitely. Because, synergistically, Karazai is really good at wiping out large infantry units. The Stardrake is really good at wiping out medium wound units, like, for example, ogres or cavalry, because he can just potentially eat 3 of them before the fighting even begins. So I think they would combo very well, and they can deal with a variety of opponents. You can also put Quicksilver on the Stardrake, so you can get them both in there and get them both fighting first at the same time, which is terrifying for any enemies. You're limited in what else you can put in the list, so you probably have to bulk it out with units that are just going to score you points. So what else would you put in there? You could probably have one other good fighting unit, and then you really have to spend the rest on scoring. So let's say you spend... With those 2 dragons, it's going to be about 1,000 points. If you then dedicate another 400 or so to another fighter unit, so you could have like Palladors, or Long Strikes for shooting, or Annihilators, something like that. So you've got about 500 points left that you need to fill up the rest of your list with. What else would you take? Loads of Liberators. You could fit about 4 or 5 units of Liberators in, and a cheap hero, maybe. That means you're going without Praetors, but you would have enough bodies then to make up for the lack of bodies that the dragons are providing. Storm Coven, potentially, to give you some magic. I feel like if you're taking 2 dragons that don't cast spells, I think maybe the Storm Coven is a bit pricey for the wizard, because then you're seriously lacking bodies, because you've got 1,200-ish points spent without any real bodies yet. So that might be a bit much. But I would have to try it out. I wouldn't mind trying that. Stardrake, Karazai and the Storm Coven. Because obviously the Storm Coven, if we're talking about synergy again, then they can put strike first and strike last with a spell. So that could combo quite well with the 2 dragon list as well. Anyway, as I was saying before I went on that train rant, trains were delayed, so my opponent was late. So we had a reduced time frame. So I decided I'm just going to play as fast as I can, make this a really fast game, so we don't take out too much of the lunch break. I didn't mind though. So basically, it wasn't set that I was necessarily going to have this opponent, but because I generally take my lunch with me to events rather than go out to buy lunch, I volunteered to be the one that would play against the player who was late, because I know I can play quickly and I don't need to go out for my lunch. So I don't mind if we play slightly into the lunch break. Nicholas is painting a Stardrake as we speak. Excellent choice. It's wild that Stardrakes are like a decade old, and now it's possible they might be better than they've ever been right now. So they're pretty hot right now, Stardrakes. Big dragons in general are just very fun at the moment. So, let's go through my opponent's Stormcast Eternals list. Now, this is not a regular Stormcast Eternals list. This is one I've never seen before. This is Heroes of the First Forged, so it's an army of renown, led by Bastion. And you have very limited units you can choose from. You can take Annihilators, you can take Gardas, you can take Praetors. Not a lot else, so there's not much else in the list. So Bastion. The bonus you get from it, though, is that Bastion can summon units down from the sky in this Regiment of Renown, and you only have to be 3 inches away from the enemy as long as you come down next to Bastion. Bastion lets you move an infantry unit at the start of the game, so he's going to let himself move. You give Field Sergeant to someone, which then means that you get +2 to movement with these units as well. So you can be slightly faster with your very slow Annihilator blobs. So you've got Bastion in there, reinforced Annihilators with shields right there, and then you've got Gardas Steel Soul. So that is the General's Regiment there, plus a unit of Grandhammers Grandhammer Annihilators reinforced in the sky, ready to drop down somewhere. Then you've got a Knight Arcanum with 3 Praetors as bodyguard, which it feels like a weird choice, because obviously you're bodyguarding a hero that's not particularly expensive or valuable, but you don't really have a lot of units to choose from in this list. So there's the box of Annihilators. There's a box of 3. There's 3 with shields in there. There's 6 with Grandhammers, and there's another 6 with Grandhammers. So 2 units of 6 with Grandhammers, 9 shield Annihilators total in the list. Potential Kronspine as well. So let's look at the wide shot here. My opponent's army is significantly slower than mine once they drop, which means it's going to be difficult to bounce around onto these objectives late game. I've picked this one as my quest marked objective because it's really far away from Bastion and the Annihilators there. So the quest doors can teleport from this spot here all the way over there, hold that objective with their ward save. Grandhammer Annihilators are obviously a big threat to Palladors, Karazai, anything with a lot of wounds because they can dish out massive damage on the charge. What my plan here is to bait Bastion into trying to bring down all his forces here to attack the Palladors, and then I redeploy away, get mostly out of charge range, and they've dropped down and accomplished very little, at which point I can then charge them with the Palladors, charge in Karazai as well. So that's why I've deployed them right up to the line. However, I've either misunderstood or miscalculated the rules slightly here, because look at this. These guys can move forward at the start of the game. Then Bastion can run maybe all the way down here, and then bring in units of Grandhammers 3 inches away from the Palladors, so he's going to be able to get them right in my face, which I underestimated. I thought he'd be way further back, but I just wasn't paying enough attention to the specifics of this army of renown. So it's actually a mistake putting them this far forward. Really, if you want to accomplish the same thing, you want to tempt him to try it, but make it unlikely, you actually want to be at least a couple of inches further back than this. Because where they are now, they are in the danger zone unless I roll really high on the redeploy. So that's a bit of a mistake there. Oh, we've got a comment about the trains. Indigent Indicator says, just competing to make lower bids, not provide better service. Exactly. That is the problem. Okay, so I've got my wizard down by the terrain and the quest doors, so they can use that to teleport. I find that a good use of the quest doors because then they keep their once per game teleport for later. They don't have to spend it on their own to jump onto the other side of the table. They can use it later on when they need it. So, in turn 1, here comes Bastion and his pals. And look how close he gets. So yeah, I just totally made a mess of this and underestimated how far he could get, because he's going to drop down some units around him now. My opponent goes for seize the centre first, so you've got Gardas and the Annihilators around the middle. Then we've got 6 Grandhammers pop down right in front of the Palladors, and 3 regular Annihilators on the quest-marked objective just to stop me teleporting onto it, which is a good move. However, it also means that they're now kind of out of the way of everything else, and they won't get much support over there because everything's so slow. So I feel like 6 Questors can take on 3 shield Annihilators. So I think that's actually going to go in my favour there, because there's only the 3 of them. So I redeploy. So 4 inches, which is not bad, but obviously if I'd set them up further back, it would be a very difficult charge now. So they do make it into the Palladors, which is bad news for me. And they whittle them down to 2 models, despite all that defense, because these guys do hit like a truck, as I know. I've used Grandhammer Annihilators many a time. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's not so bad. The Palladors are still alive. I can maybe bring back a unit of 3 later. Let's just proceed with the game plan. I'm going to try and shenanigan my way to scoring points. But Karazai, I don't want the enemy to just have total domination of this square here, because that means I'll never hold more objectives than them. And maybe this one is an issue because I don't know if the enemy would want to send anyone back there, but they certainly could. And a unit of 6 Grandhammers still in the sky to come down, which concerns me. So I'm thinking Karazai can actually come in here and help save the Palladors, because he could definitely eat and kill those Grandhammers on his own. He could do a good job at that. They don't have that many wounds in the unit. So that's an option. I'm going to teleport the Questors into that corner, make a start on going after these guys on the quest marked objective. The issue with Karazai going this way is that the Praetors will not be able to keep up with him. So I have to decide whether that's worth doing or whether to hide him back and wait for the enemy to come to me, which I'm very concerned about after what happened here, because Bastion can come towards me, drop them down really close to me, and make a redeploy unlikely, and then the 6 Grandhammers would still get to me. So I'm worried about that. So I am thinking about being aggressive, ditching my ward save, and just going to try and clear out these Annihilators, free up the Palladors, because all my shenanigan units are the Questors, the Palladors, Long Strikes, Vigilors can drop out the sky, Praetors potentially if Karazai is not around. Lots of small units that either have teleports or ranged attacks, so they don't need to be in the thick of the fight. So I think I can score good points over the course of the game as I destroy enemy units, and as they have to move towards me off the objectives, and they don't have any teleports at all. My opponent does not have the Stormreach portal. I don't know whether you're allowed to take it in the Army of Renown, or because he said he didn't want it anyway, because it's like a battle tactic liability. Because in this list, if you pick, for example, Do Not Waver, 2 units fight, no units die, that's risky against a load of Annihilators, because they do hit quite hard. So you could then use it against a portal instead, which you don't want to happen. Which is kind of why I've got mine all the way down here in the corner. I don't want anyone just fighting it and scoring easy tactics on it. So, 10 points for the enemy. Into my turn, I go for Reclaim the Realms. So, there's a simple reason I'm doing this now. I don't know for a fact that I'm going to have this many units alive at the end of the game, because it's going to be a big fight. I'm just going to throw Karazai in. We're going to play... I'm playing as fast a game as possible, so the Weaselly kind of stuff, I'm going to do slightly less of that and just throw him in, try and play the game quickly. So I'm going to do Reclaim the Realms now, which should be an auto-complete, because I can just teleport and bring units down in each table section. Not worry about Karazai, he's going to get thrust into combat. So, here we go. The Questors teleport over into the corner. And that's cool for them. Long Strikes drop down on this objective. Vigilors drop down on this objective. Start shooting the enemy. Palladors get killed in combat, as you can see, because Karazai didn't roll high enough to make it to the Grandhammers on his charge. He could only make it to the Shield Annihilators and Gardas, and I decided, you know what, let's do that. I might be able to kill loads of them. Killed a few of them, and then took some wounds in retaliation, which you don't expect Shield Annihilators to hit that hard, but actually takes 8 wounds, even though I've got Finest Hour up. And then another 4 wounds as well, from Gardas. So Karazai in a bit of danger, he's got Bastion staring at him, but you can see the beginnings of a game plan here, because I've got all the corners kind of locked down. The enemy will want to kill Karazai, but I don't know if that's the best thing to do in this situation. 6 Grandhammers are about to come in. You've got 4 here. Do you send them all after Karazai? I don't think that would be necessary. I think 1 unit would probably be enough to get it done. You could send them all in there. The issue with doing that is that you're locked into this area then, with lots of very slow units. And I've got potential objectives. I'll be taking this one at some point. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And even this one are all quite far away from you if you're doing all your fighting here. So, interesting. So I only score 8 points in my turn though, because I don't hold more objectives. Because I've intentionally left this one alone, because I want to use that one for a battle tactic later on, which is attack on 2 fronts. So I don't want to take all the objectives. I want to leave this one so it's still available for me to take later. So into... because obviously I could trail the Long Strikes onto it, but I've elected not to by choice. So actually, I do have more objectives, because then I realised actually my opponent never had this one in the first place, because he didn't deploy on it. So I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, and my opponent has 1, 2, 3. So that's why I just did the points, gave myself 10, because I didn't realise this one wasn't in anyone's possession. My opponent gets priority, and goes for Slay the Tyrant, so wants to slay Karazai. The Shield Annihilators are staring at the Questors. 6 Grandhammer Annihilators dropping down with Bastion's ability next to Karazai. 4 of them are down here, and those 4 are going after the Vigilors, potentially, by the looks of it. So Bastion, loads of Annihilators, and some existing Annihilators are all going to go after Karazai. They all get in. They're going to start whomping. And he's dead. So Karazai gets killed by all the Annihilators, as you'd expect. And Bastion then piles in and kills a Praetor. So Karazai's dead. The Palladors are dead. But weirdly, I'm actually feeling pretty good about things because all the enemy units have dropped down out the sky. They have no teleports, and most of their force is consolidated here. The Kronspine is up, but if I can kill the wizard, then that'll be gone as well. And I do have teleporting shooting units, so what I need to do now is take objectives from the enemy. So 8 points for the enemy there, because obviously I still hold a lot of objectives. In my battle round number 2, I go for take the flanks, which as you can see I've got set up nicely here. I've got the Questors there, as long as they don't get themselves killed, and I've got the Vigilors there as well, that I can just move off to the flank. So, the Questors, you can see, I think there were 5 there, so I rallied one of them back. Got into the Shield Annihilators, got onto the objective with the charge, so I'm now on a 5+ ward, so with that I'm winning this fight easily. The Long Strikes move towards the terrain and blast away at the Shield Annihilators, and I've also cast -1 charge dice on them with the Knight Arcanum as well, so that's going to keep them from being too much of a threat. The Praetors move away from Bastion, take some wounds, but that's okay because he would have just killed them in combat anyway, so I might as well try and live. And my wizard, you can see, teleported itself with the teleport chamber as well, all the way over here. So I'm also setting up for things like threatening on these objectives with one model, so the enemy will have to, if you want to go on them, you have to stay there or I'll just nick them off you. And also I'm in range to cast -1 charge dice on Bastion or Annihilators potentially next time. So 10 points for me because, again, holding all the objectives, racking up those points, even though I've lost some units. I'm keeping the 3 dead Palladors that can come back to life in my back pocket for the time being. I'm not going to bring them in yet. Just holding on to them because I've already got good board control. I don't need them right now. So instead I'm going to use them and bring them on later when I need an objective that the enemy has abandoned, perhaps. Or when I need to hit a vulnerable unit with 1 extra thing to finish it off. So I'm just going to keep them back, because I am low on teleports compared to the lists that I sometimes bring. The Questors have got 1, the Long Strikes have got 1, and I've got the teleport chamber as well. So I have some teleports, but I would like to be able to bring a fresh unit down as well, and they are not necessary at the moment. So my opponent gets the priority in round 3 and goes for Slay the Entourage, so just wants to kill this one Praetor, which is going to be very easy. So really, I could have kept the Praetor in combat and made that a very difficult battle tactic to achieve with anything else. The Kronspine is heading for the Questors. These 3 Annihilators with -1 charge dice are going for the Long Strikes. I redeploy my Praetor into the woods so he can't be shot by Bastion, so he's going to have to actually commit more to kill me now. Covering fire from the Long Strikes. Well, that is the result of covering fire. A terrible dice roll there, obviously, and I barely kill anything. Bastion charges into the Praetor, and all these Annihilators are kind of just shuffling around. You can see my opponent has actually got a good system here. He's been marking with these blue dice which objectives he holds, so I steal that idea in the next round and start putting orange dice on my objectives so it's clearer. So you can see these blue ones are enemy objectives now, and this one's about to be taken as well. Despite all that defense to try and keep the Praetor, which would have denied a battle tactic, did not survive. I kill the last Annihilator, and the Kronspine is still in there fighting them. So my opponent scores, that should be a 6 there, so it should be 8 points. Slay the Entourage and holds now 3 objectives, and you can see I've got these on them as well. The orange ones to show which ones are mine, which is a nice visual demonstration. Into my turn, I go for attack on 2 fronts. Take 2 objectives that I don't currently have. One of them has to be taken from the enemy. So if we look at the wide shot, very easy, because I can take this one with the Vigilors, and I'm going to teleport the Long Strikes onto this one and then start shooting the Praetors there. So the Long Strikes can have this one. So that's exactly what happens. Long Strikes get over there, kill some Praetors. I think they just kill 1. And you can see the Questors have killed the Kronspine now, which is good. I finest houred them. Vigilors onto this objective. And I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objectives. So, you can see the issue my opponent is having now. the only units that can come and take this one are 2 Praetors and the Knight Arcanum. That's probably not going to be sufficient to clear out the long strikes on this objective. The Annihilators are very far away with Gardas. That's 2 really scary units there. The other Annihilators are kind of stuck down here. So, at best, my opponent might be able to get more objectives than me in the next round via Bastion getting onto this one and these guys running onto this one. But that's a very slender lead, and you're also abandoning this objective then, which means I can immediately take it back with something. So, let's see what happens, because I've got a nice 10-point round to end there. So I'm scoring the maximum so far. My opponent, not quite yet. That should be a 6 though, so it should be more on that turn. So, you can see in my opponent's turn, my opponent is going first in the next round. Takes an objective off me there and off me here, which I think is the same battle tactic I did. So attack on 2 fronts. These 2 are going to switch over to the enemy now. And the Kronspine is back, and all the Annihilators are going in this direction. So, with my covering fire, I destroy the Praetors, but I did have to redeploy away and let the Knight Arcanum have this objective. The reason I was happy to do that, it wasn't going to prevent anything, because there's these 2 objectives, the one down and bottom left and bottom right, had already been taken, which is already more than I have. So there's no good risking the long strike's lives just for the sake of trying to hold on to this objective, because it doesn't deny my opponent any points right now. So I'll give that one away temporarily, because it doesn't affect the score. 10 points for Stormcast, the evil Stormcast. So look, all these objectives are in enemy hands now. But it's still a good position, because these 2 have been totally abandoned. This one's totally abandoned, so I can get to those quite easily. This one I can take easily as well. So, what do we do about this? My turn 4, take their land. So I just need to take a piece of land. So I can just take this. And as long as I leave the long strikes trailing onto it, it's all good with me. So, the Questors who were up here teleport themselves down here onto this objective. And my wizard is hanging out down here, terrified of Bastion, of course. The long strikes just reposition themselves a bit, stay within 3 of that piece of terrain, and then blast the Knight Arcanum, which also gets rid of the Kronspine. 3 Palladors come back to life and get on this objective. My opponent tries to redeploy to deny me the objective, but doesn't roll very high and only gets a couple of them on there. And then some of them die, I think, from having javelins thrown at them as well. So, loads of these objectives are about to flip. So I score 10 because I flip this one, and this one, which means I now have 5. And going into the next round. So, I'm in the lead. If I... Let's see. So there's the score. I have got 40 points. My opponent has got... That should be an 8 there as well. So my opponent has got 36. So I'm in the lead. If I score maximum, then I just win. However, for me to score maximum, I would have to go second. And I don't like the sound of that at all. Because if my opponent gets the next turn, these Annihilators could very easily kill the Palladors. These guys would take that objective, maybe, or they go after the long strikes, and maybe Gardas puts himself on this one. So that's going to flip some objectives. Bastion can go after the Questors, and maybe he wouldn't clear them out in one go, but he'd make a start on it. So I want the next turn, because it's going to allow me to kill enough stuff and score enough objective points to put me in a position where my opponent would need a maximum turn to win at the end. I just think me going for second in this turn would end badly, because I think I would run out of units. So I do get the priority, and I think my best chance of winning is taking it and then trying to deny my opponent from taking all the objectives in the last turn. So on my turn, no battle tactic because I've taken the double. The Questors actually charge Bastion because I want to take this objective as well, which means Bastion has a choice to make in the final turn of whether maybe he goes for this one or stays on this one and tries to kill me. I've also cast -1 charge dice on him, but then I decide to charge him anyway with the Questors, and enough of them live, so I'm going to have this objective. I've also put my wizard on it, which gives Bastion an issue as well. Palladors run away from the Grandhammers that were staring at them over to 3 inches away from these Grandhammers. But by this time, my opponent doesn't have enough command points to countercharge. So I decided I'm not actually going to charge them. I'm just going to stay here and hold the objective. You can see I was prepared for combats because I put Finest Hour on them. I was fully prepared to make that charge. But because I decided to charge in the Questors, I didn't want 2 simultaneous combats. And also, why risk it when I'm just holding the objective anyway? And it forces them to deal with me next time, rather than charging in, dying, and costing myself some points. The Vigilors move up onto this objective. So, here's the situation. I hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 8 objectives. For my opponent to score maximum points, he needs to take 4 of them off me. How can you do that? The Annihilators could take this one off the Vigilors very easily. Gardas, I think, would struggle to take this one off the Long Strikes because he doesn't have enough attacks, and look how far away he is. These Annihilators could get to this one, and Bastion is going to try and kill all these models because it's already mine, so you'd have to kill both the Questors, or you could, yeah, you'd have to kill everything. Or you could kill one Questor and the Arcanum. So, yeah, it's tricky for Bastion to take this objective, because you just have to kill everybody on there, because if the Arcanum's alive, they're the same control score, so you would have to kill the Arcanum definitely, and either both the Questors or one of them, because killing just the 2 Questors isn't enough because it'd be tied. So I'm definitely going to lose this one, you would think, to those Annihilators charging into the Palladors, but that's okay, because I think I'm in a pretty good position to try and win this. Because that would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3 taken, which is not enough. My opponent has to take 4 off me to get maximum points. So let's find out whether I can hold out against Bastion. So 6 points for me. See whether my strategy pays off. So, I countercast -1. Let's see. Yeah, I did. Countercast -1 to wound on Bastion to make it less likely that he'll finish off everybody over here. Palladors are going to get attacked by everybody. The Annihilators and Gardas are trying to take this one. And Bastion, with his pile-in, I think, gets into position to attack everyone. But I've noticed that my opponent isn't actually taking this objective. I thought that would be one that he would definitely go for, but chooses not to. Kills the Questors, but does not kill the Knight Arcanum, so that objective is still mine. Clears out the Palladors, so takes this one off me. Clears out the Vigilors, takes that one off me. So they flip. That one flips as well. So we've got 3 blue and 5 orange objectives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, looking at it, the way my opponent actually played this, it was actually impossible to get maximum points because he also needed this objective or this one. So I don't know whether he kind of miscalculated when he was looking at it, or just gave up on trying to get maximum points. I'm not sure. But I think maybe it was just missing which ones needed to be taken. Because even if Bastion takes this one, that's still only 8 points for the turn, which is not enough. So, yeah, 8 points. So it's still 8 points because you need to have more objectives to get more, which would turn it into a draw. So as that game ends, let me just pull up the website here. So the final score, as you can probably see on the dice, is 46 points to the Stormcast of me and 44 to the enemy Stormcast. So, win by 2 points. It wasn't looking great when the Palladors and Karazai got killed, but after that kind of forced me to not want to fight at all and forced me to play in an entirely objective-grabbing shenanigan sort of way, which my list is pretty good at. Not as good as some Stormcast lists. There are some with even more teleports than I've got. For example, if you have a Knight Zephyros, or if you have a Priest with Translocation, you can have even more teleports. But the Questors and the Long Strikes and the Teleport Chamber are pretty good. And there we go. I was just able to get onto enough objectives over the course of the game. Take too many. My opponent was consolidated in this area and wasn't able to strike out at enough of the objectives in time to secure it. So, that's why I was confident going into the last turn that at worst, I would end up with a draw, because if my opponent had got 2 more points, which would have been maximum, it would have been a draw. So it was definitely possible that could have happened, but it would have required these Annihilators jumping onto this objective and Bastion actually killing everyone there, which is probably slightly odds against, because the Knight Arcanum wasn't wounded yet. There was also the 2 Questors, and with the -1 to wound spell, I think on average probably something would have survived over here. Because he's not got many attacks, Bastion. So, another win. And now here are some pictures of the armies. So this is the one I just faced. Loads of Annihilators, as you can see. I've got 6 Grand Hammers and 3 Shield Annihilators myself, but I don't have this many. Very stylish, with the nice glowing eyes there. I've never attempted the glowing eyes on the Stormcast before. Maybe one day. Then we've got some more Stormcasts. You're going to see a lot of Stormcasts here, so if you hate Stormcast, you might want to look away for a few minutes. So, look at this. I don't know which dragon this is representing up here, though. I'm going to guess Krondis, but some nice big fire effects there. Very stylish, very vibrant and striking, and also vastly different from the other Stormcast Eternal armies, which is what you want. You want some nice variety. The classic Vandus Hammerhand there. I don't know whether he was actually playing as Vandus or just a regular Lord Celestin on Dracoth. And there's no Dracothian Guard, though, so that combo wouldn't be happening. But there is long strikes in this list. Some Liberators there I see as well, the nice new ones. Then we have got some Sylvaneth, very colourful as always for Sylvaneth. Some very nice, let's see, very nice beetle action. Very vibrant again. The Fire Slayers that I said I would get you some nice close-ups of because they're very well done. Look at this. Highlighting beards is actually one of the, pun intended, highlights of painting dwarves in the old world, actually. It's a lot of fun painting hair, especially when it's very textured. If it's kind of the smooth hair that you see on some of the modern vampires, I don't like it so much. But the heavily textured stuff that's got lots of individual strands to highlight, like these beards and these big spiky hairdos, not just like 3 big smooth strands of hair floating off a vampire's head. It looks almost like a ghost hair, some of those, don't they? But these, very nice. And I'd like to see more Fire Slayers out there, so hopefully they get a nice book. We've got some more Stormcast. These are the ones I faced in round 1 with the very nice cloaks. So look at that. And this is the one, the model that won the best single miniature, and you can see why with freehand on the cloak. I've never been tempted to attempt such a thing. I'm pretty good at staying in the lines and highlighting, not so much freehand. And that's a skill I'm not really looking to develop because it takes a lot of time. And drawing on a flat surface is not within my skill set at the moment. And I think it would be a lot of commitment to try and become good at something like that. And there are people out there that are doing it amazingly. And I don't think I would live up to anywhere near their standards. We've got the Reclusians, we've got the Stormcoven. I think the Stormcoven actually make the rest of the army look quite tame colour-wise because they're so vibrant with the gold on them compared to everybody else. So these guys look very bright and exciting. Everyone else looks very kind of dark and dank and depressing compared to the Stormcoven, don't they? And then the back of the cloaks, back of Bastion's cloak, very nice. Yeah, so plenty of pictures of those. So anyone that wants to see more of that, just pause the video. We've got some Lumineth. You don't see a lot of them around at the moment, actually. But very interesting model here. A giant cow with a hammer. I don't know what that actually is, the miniature. Very nice. You don't see too many Lumineth around. I think they got hit slightly in the new edition. Then, very nice, we've got some Slaanesh. And these are amazing. Look at that. Glutos. Sigvald, what more can you ask for in an army other than those two? Very cool. Then we've got the biggest Krondis or Karazai I've ever seen. This is an enormous dragon mounted on an enormous rock hanging majestically miles off the battlefield level. So the wings are never going to hit anyone. And here's the rest of the Stormcast. I'm going to guess those are stylishly converted prosecutors there. There's Yndrasta. And that is very cool, Yndrasta. I am a fan of a good Yndrasta. I actually did a video a few years ago where I went through social media and found all the coolest pictures of Yndrasta miniatures and then rated them. So you'll probably find that still on the channel. I think it's called Rating or Finding the Coolest Yndrasta, I think it was called. Very nice model. Then we've got some more Khorne. So we've got Bloodthirsters in this one. And we've got some more Juggernauts, who are very hot right now apparently. Bloodletters, very cool. And there's the other Khornate army that I faced. Nice Juggernaut action. And onto the final round. So, might start losing my voice at some point, because I've been talking while playing all weekend, obviously. And yes, Nicholas, those cloaks are ridiculous on those Stormcast. Edeneth Deepkin. And we are playing the Jaws of Gallet, which means... So, I think I have a 100% loss rate, potentially, on this battle plan, because I always do the same thing. I take the lead early on, make my opponent the underdog, they camp on their own objectives and start deleting my objectives, so at the end of the game it's very difficult for me to score. As we run out of objectives, it's difficult for me to use shenanigans to get on them. So you don't really want to race into an early lead on this one. You don't want to make anyone the underdog, but you don't always have a choice, because otherwise you're just scoring nothing. And especially if you're forced to go first, so this Deepkin list is 1 drop, so that could force me to go first. What do I do? Do I score 10? Do I score 8? Do I score 4? Do I just score a battle tactic? Do I use a battle tactic that I'll never be able to complete just to get it out of the way and then set on some objectives and score a few points? Because really, your opponent can dictate who's going to be the underdog because they're going second. They can choose to get onto more objectives. They can choose whether to complete a battle tactic. So if they want to be the underdog, they can just do it. So if you intentionally score 0 in the first round, by staying off all the objectives, failing a battle tactic, your opponent might say, well, I don't care if I make you the underdog now because I'm just going to take a 10-0 lead. Good luck catching up with me, buddy. So it's a tricky one. And I think maybe it's a slightly flawed battle plan in that way, because the underdog bonus is so huge compared to all the other battle plans. And on that basis, I wouldn't mind a tweak to this mission in the next handbook. Or just not including it at all. I think it's fun, but I don't know if it's particularly balanced. So, what is in this Deepkin list? Let's have a look. We have got... Oh, by the way, also, going into round 5, I'm on the top table. If I win the game, then I would win the tournament. I've got 3 wins and a draw up to this point. My opponent went into this on 4 wins, which is a bit ominous. So let's see what the Deepkin are bringing in their single regiment. There's Eidolon of Mathlan, Aspect of the Sea, who is this 2-cast spellcaster here, who is quite scary. There are 2 Leviatons, which are these big turtles. There's one there and one out on this side, next to each half of the shipwreck. There is Achillean Morsar Guard, which are the Eel Cavalry. So 340 points, 2 units of those, 2 units of 6. They do mortal wounds on the charge, which is scary. The turtles do mortal wounds as well, which is very scary. So, my confidence level at the start of this game is not very high, because obviously playing on the top table against someone who's won all their games so far, including some against Stormcast, and there's decent mortal wounds being dished out. On the other hand, the Deepkin's saves aren't as high as some of the other armies I've faced, so potentially I could get some wounds through without very good rend, which is what my army struggles with. So, my opponent is going to make me go first. What is my plan here? Well, I don't think I can shenanigan my way to a victory here, because my opponent will make me go first and can then dictate who the underdog is, unless I score 0, in which case I think that's a bad idea anyway. So my opponent will make me go first. I might as well just try and score as many as possible, because my opponent could choose to be the underdog anyway, even if I don't score many at all. So I'm going to lay down the gauntlet, pick a quest-marked objective, which is the one I don't want my opponent to delete because it's quest marked, so I'm going to pick the one that my opponent would least like to delete, potentially, so maybe this one would be a good quest marked objective. On the other hand, I might not be able to get onto it for the whole game then, so I wouldn't get my ward save. But the main thing I'm going to do is plonk Karazai on the middle objective with Caesar Center, put the Praetors next to him, and say, come at me, bro. Everyone come and charge Karazai. enjoy yourself. Why not? And the Palladors will be there as backup. The Questors will look for a chance to hit an objective. And then I've got the Long Strikes and the Vigilors to drop down at some point as well. So I'm just going to take the centre with these two, sit there, come at me, bro. Hopefully I survive, and then I start the counter-assault. Because I'm going to be reducing the attacks of the incoming units with Karazai. And I'd have a ward save. So there's the battle plan. You can see the territory. My opponent does not go anywhere near the edge of the territory, staying right back away from the Palladors. And immediately some covering fire wounds Karazai as I advance on the middle. I've put the Palladors behind. I did measure out to see whether I could hit the turtle with the Palladors, but it would have been like a 9-inch charge after the full move. So I decided it wasn't worth the risk of being out there in the open, so I just put him safely behind Karazai, ready to countercharge potentially, or also ready to come in the next turn as well. You can see I used all that defense against the covering fire because I realised it was actually quite scary covering fire. The turtles have quite good shooting. I've got a purple sun out, which is nice. So I did seize the centre and accomplished it. 10 points. So my opponent can now choose whether to be the underdog or not. You can see some jaws are up as well there. So the purple sun is banished immediately. The jaws are going towards Karazai, but I do rally all my wounds back on Karazai, so that's nice. And then everyone converges on Karazai. So my opponent is really going big into this. If Karazai does not die, that's potentially deadly for the Deepkin now. Because they'd be stuck there. They could be charged by Palladors, who could then retreat and charge them again, over and over again. And bad things could happen if they don't kill Karazai here. And I have laid down the gauntlet. I'm inviting them in and saying, I'm going to sit here, would you like to join me? And then we can throw lots of dice at each other, and then whoever fails the most saves is the one that dies. How do you feel about that? Let's do it. So I all out defense the Praetors from shooting, because my opponent rightly has pinpointed them as a weak link in this whole system, because if they die, I lose my ward save, and I lose the -1 attack on everything for them being bodyguards. Now, what I should be doing, but I totally forget that it exists every single time, and what would be great in this situation is having my wizard around here somewhere. That way, if the Praetors were to get killed, in the following turn I could then put a ward save onto Karazai from the wizard, because of the Envoy of the Heavens, that's the one. So, but I forget that exists, even though I've made a point of telling people. I actually asked Rob, Mr. Honest Wargamer, the host of the TSN Arena himself, would he like to bet on whether I am going to remember to use Envoy of the Heavens in this game? And he said he gives me about a 50-50 shot of remembering. Spoiler alert, I totally forgot about it again as soon as we finished the conversation. So I didn't use it. So Turtle gets in, but his wings, they're not really wings, are they? The turtle flippers can't fit there because the building's there, so it has to be taken off the base temporarily. Karazai starts taking damage slowly from mortal wounds and things on the charge going in and shooting. Down to 10 wounds. Another turtle gets in. And the jaws get in. I'm keeping my ward save though, but I'm still taking damage. Down to 4 wounds as all the attacks go through. And, well, that's a good attack roll. Down to 1 wound. And dead. So Karazai is dead. So the gauntlet that I laid down was answered with a slap in the face, with a gloved hand to Karazai's face, and he's dead. So, that didn't quite pay off, but it's not all over yet, because the Palladors can steam in there, and I've got long strikes to come down, so if all that goes well, I could potentially delete a turtle and a cavalry unit next turn, which would be a reasonable trade, actually. And then I'd be locking down more units in combat, meaning they're not charging me, so they're not getting those juicy bonuses. So let's see what we can do. My opponent only scores 6 for take their land, which was... let's see. Which piece of terrain was it? I don't even remember now. But my opponent is obviously not holding more objectives than me, because I held... Let's see. I think it was this piece of terrain here. Yes, that sounds right. Okay, into my turn then. So, let's go back. So the end of that turn, which objectives does my opponent have now? So this one's been abandoned. I've got these two. My opponent's got that one. Did my opponent actually score 6, or should it have been 10 there? Let me have a look, because I can actually load up the game here. So, let's see, because something feels off about that. So I'm going to pull up the battle information here. So it's actually very good malarkey, because it tracks the battle tactics that you do as well. So, okay, my opponent failed in the first round to do take their land, which I think was... You know what? I've just totally remembered what happened now. Take their land was on this, and my opponent failed the teleport spell on the wizard, which is why there's nobody on this take their land piece of terrain. Teleport spell failed, needed like a 4 on the dice and rolled a 3. So that's why the battle tactic was failed. That's why there's 6 points scored. So it was an unintentional underdog bonus gained there. So this is really the dream in this battle plan for the Deepkin now. Because you're technically the underdog, even though if you look at the forces on each side, there is no way you're the underdog now, because you've killed Karazai. So you've got a massive advantage, but you're still technically the underdog. So you're going to be able to start deleting my objectives now. So it's kind of the nightmare start. And anytime you can make your opponent go first on this one and then dictate the underdog status is a huge deal. So, into my turn anyway, the Palladors blast themselves in there, and they're going to start trying to kill. The long strikes drop down over there, as you can see, so they can shoot the turtle. But despite all my attacks going in, I don't actually wipe out any of those units. The long strikes just don't do very well on their shooting, and the turtle just tanks and makes loads of saves. So what can you do? And the Palladors have a disappointing round of attacks as well, despite Finest Hour, which was helping their wound rolls. And the Vigilors were able to shoot at the turtle as well to give me +1 to hit, but despite all that, I didn't get anywhere near killing it. I only did like 3 wounds with the long strikes. So, woeful attacks so far. In the first round, actually, Karazai rolled really badly on his attacks as well, which is why barely any of the enemies were killed, and they were all able to strike him without him doing anything. I think I got 1 of the good attacks through, and maybe 2 of the Talon attacks. So, forced not many saves to be made, and the enemy just passed most of them as well. So 2 poor rounds of attacks puts us in quite a perilous position now, but the Questors have teleported onto their quest-marked objective. But I do score 10 again, so we'll see how long that lasts. In my opponent's turn, slay the Entourage, going for this final Praetor, which should be easy to kill. And then the Eels of Doom are going after the Vigilors. One of the Turtles is going after them as well, potentially the Long Strikes if he rolls high enough. And yeah, it's not looking great. So, Palladors are going to get shot at as well. I think by something. I think the Eidolon has got a shooting attack. Long strikes, covering fire. They barely do anything again. So they each time they... Well, the last round they barely got anything through. This round they got like 8 through. And my opponent just again tanked all the saves. So I'm throwing 8 dice in at the... saying, okay, you've got 8 saves to make. Made all my attacks. Do your worst. My opponent then throws the dice down. Makes like half of them, then makes half the ward saves, and barely any damage is done. So, I don't know if army-wide ward save is in 1 turn only, because the way the tide works, you have a different benefit in each round, so I can't remember whether the ward save lasts forever, or whether the ward save is on a particular turn. But it was difficult getting through the multiple layers of saves. So, what I'm thinking, actually, for this list... Who would be good? I'm struggling to get through the ward saves here. You know who would be good? Is it the Knight Relictor that shuts down or puts -1 on enemy ward saves? I'll have to have a check. But I do have access to a Knight Relictor because I've got one in the Questors box. So, could use him for that. The Eidolon is attacking my wizard. And I rolled a 1 on the redeploy to try and escape, which is why I didn't escape. The turtle gets into the Vigilors and will be able to pile in and hit the long strikes, sadly. And the Vigilors are going to get chomped by all these eels. And they get mostly chomped. My wizard actually survives, which is hilarious. Long strikes all get killed by a turtle though. So this turtle just does massive damage, loads of mortal wounds. Crits do 3 mortals, so this thing's ridiculous. How many points is that thing? How many points is a turtle? Let me try and pull up that list. It's quite a lot. Let's see. So the turtle is 480 points. Yeah, so you'd expect it to be ridiculous. So my wizard survives, which is nice, and then I'm going to be able to teleport away because I've got the teleport chamber right here, and there's no, it doesn't specify that you have to be out of combat to use it. So the quest marked objective gets deleted by my opponent, who is wildly still the underdog, even though it looks like I'm going to get tabled very soon. So 10 points for my opponent there. Into round 3 for me. Reclaim the realms because I'm not going to be able to score points much longer. My wizard teleports away over here onto an objective. Quest doors just hide from the enemy. Palladors escape from combat. And the long strikes drop down a fresh unit of 3 and shoot at the Eidolon, who I've put -1 charge dice onto just to shut down the chance of a counter charge. But again, 3 long strike shooting, very disappointing. They only do like 3 wounds. So I do score some good points in that round. I think I forgot to put them down at this stage. My opponent goes for take the flanks, which is an easy one to set up because these eels are there in the corner and the Eidolon is close to this side as well. Despite -1 charge dice, might make it difficult to make that charge. I'm running low on command points though. I think my quest doors look really nice. Just thought I'd say that. I think they're very cool models. And arguably, you could say it's one of the best Stormcast kits, top 5 perhaps. I think the Vanguard-Palladors are up there as well. Now that I've painted them, I've got an appreciation for them. Who else is in the Stormcast top 5 of coolest units visually? I think the Quest Doors and the Palladors are in there. Do we think any of the dragons make it in there? Maybe Bastion, he's very cool. Yndrasta, a candidate as well. Who else do we think? Some of the new prosecutors, actually, they could be up there. They're very good. We've got Tomb King Tristan in the chat. Good evening. This is quite a late one tonight, so I'm glad we've got a decent audience for this one. The reason I'm able to do this so late, actually, is because I'm currently off work. Because I didn't take that many days off over the last year, it turns out, so I had loads of them saved up, and you've got to use them up, or they expire. So I've taken most of February off work. So I'm using that to do some painting, and some PC gaming, and getting in some tabletop games as well. Played some old world games with Mr. Remington Steele. So you'll actually see a battle report for that old world game possibly tomorrow. I need to check with Mr. Rem to see when he's available, but sometime this week definitely. Okay, so everyone is hunting down my units now. Pallador's in danger. So here is an interesting situation. Whenever you have 4 wounds left in a unit and you don't want to be there next turn, that is ideal, because the D3 damage you take from escaping, you can't die because you've got 4 wounds left. Also, on the subject of D3 actually, so, totally wild in this game, the Deepkin have quite a lot of things that do D3 damage or D3 wounds, and by my count, if my opponent watches this and remembers it differently, then let me know. But I seem to remember that every single D3 damage, like not just most of them, but literally every single one, came up as 3 wounds out of the D3. So, wild. But there were some other D3 rolls that weren't damage, that weren't coming up as 3s, but every time it was damage related, it was 3. I'm pretty sure it was every single one, because after the first 5, I was thinking, okay, this is getting pretty wild, and then it just continued to snowball from there. So, wild times. So, are the Questors going to get killed? Yes. Despite all out defense. It would have been nice to have them because they can teleport. Pallador dies as well. So, I don't even get to hang on for my 1 wound. And the long strikes die as well. So, I'm down to a wizard. And it's looking like Karazai, failing all his attacks in turn 1, was a decisive blow. Because even if he dies, if I manage to take down 1 unit with him, all of this stuff that's happening now is mitigated, because there's less things the enemy can strike at once, so it leaves me with more units and less enemies that are just covering the whole table now. So it's like the nightmare scenario. And my opponent is still technically the underdog, because I keep scoring points. So my opponent can choose to delete objectives. Does this look like an underdog situation to you? I've got a wizard left. So, oh yeah, I didn't add on my points. So I did score some in that round. And now the objective that my wizard is sitting on has been deleted, because my opponent's still the underdog, hilariously. I try to cast a purple sun. And my opponent rolls a double 6 to shut it down. So I do not have a purple sun. So the only thing I can try and score is take their land on this piece of terrain, but it requires the enemy to fail a 1-inch redeploy to reach the terrain, which obviously you can't. So it's an auto fail of the battle tactic, but at least it gets rid of an enemy command point, which is all I can do now. None of the other battle tactics are open to me. So I score 0. Then my opponent chooses Reclaim the Realms, auto completes, I've got no units left, kills the wizard and the purple sun, and that's the end. So no more points for me. My opponent scores another 10. So it got away from me a bit at the end there, and there you go. That's what's left at the end. No Stormcast, but the teleport chamber is still alive. So let's go back to the final few pictures there. Where was the last nice big wide shot? So there we go. So, had I known now, or had I known then what I know now, and the amount of mortal wounds that can be dished out by the Deepkin, I think I would just try and play an avoidance game and not fight too many of them at once. Because the whole idea of Karazai was to try and lock down all their units, heavily reduce all their attacks, so that they don't end up killing him. So I've got their entire army pinned in one place, and then hit them from all sides with like long strike shooting, Vigilors, Palladors, all steaming in at the same time on this big mess of units that are locked into one spot. Obviously didn't go very well, because Karazai got himself killed. And he didn't do much before then either. So it was the 2 really bad rounds of attacks that really hammered it home, the result, because Karazai failed to kill anyone. When the long strikes dropped in and the Palladors charged as well, I just couldn't get through the saves, the armor saves and the ward saves of all the Deepkin. So those 2 rounds of attacks being below average kind of put the nail in the coffin, and it was essentially game over by that point, I think. I still think it would have been tricky, even if Karazai lives and kills a unit of knights. What are they actually called again? Morsar Guards. They're not technically knights. So I think it still would have been difficult, because these turtles are very tough to get through. They've got a lot of wounds, a good save, and I think this is just a good list when they get the charges in. They've definitely got the tools to deal with Karazai because they killed him, so obviously they do. Maybe it's just a bad matchup for Karazai. Maybe it was a bad matchup to play the come at me bro game. Maybe he should have just been hiding around the edge somewhere. But again, I have to engage the enemy eventually, because the enemy are going seconds. They can elect to become the underdog, at which point they can delete my objectives and force me to come to them. So, how about this for a strategy for the Jaws? You're forced to go first, you intentionally score 0 points. Your opponent can then say, okay, I'm also going to score 0, so you're not the underdog. Would your opponent do that, or would they then score 10 and then say, okay, I'll let you be the underdog, you can try and claw back this 10-point deficit over the course of a game? At which point you can then start deleting their objectives and camp in on the other ones, because you're going to be the underdog for the bulk of the game because you've got a 10-point deficit. So you're going to be able to keep deleting their objectives, and even if it's going swimmingly for you, it's only in the last turn or 2 that you'll catch up, or they'll catch up on points. Oh yeah, you'll catch up on the points by the end. So you'd hope to just overtake them on turn 5, ideally, because then they're never the underdog and can't destroy your objectives. So I might consider doing something wild like that next time on the Jaws, because I've got 100% losing rate on it, so what I'm doing obviously isn't working. Being made to go first on it, I think, is just bad. Because again, your opponent can choose to be the underdog unless you intentionally score 0, and why would you do that? Here's an interesting one. What about baiting your opponent? So, you start off on one of the objectives, you make your opponent go first, they think it's safe to be on an objective, and then maybe you redeploy off one objective. which gives them slightly more points, which makes you the underdog. I don't know. Let me know what you think. What's the best way to play the Jaws? Is it just be one drop? Is it play the avoidance game? I think avoidance game definitely would have worked better here. If we had the 8 objectives, I would have been much happier against this lot, because they want to be consolidated, because there's some spells this wizard can do that puts, I think it's -1 to save on 3 nearby enemy units, which is obviously very powerful. So they want to be consolidated. They want to have you pinned down with the turtles, who've got good sustained combat power, and then charge in with the eels to do the big mortal wounds on the charge. If you force them to spread out and they can't support each other, I could then focus down and kill one thing at a time, which I was never able to do. Although if the long strikes rolled the way they did and the enemy saves were the way they were, I don't think I would have killed anything anyway. So it was still going to be tricky, and obviously someone who wins all 5 games at a tournament like this player did obviously knows what they're doing with the army. So it was still going to be tricky. So I wasn't confident going in once I saw that I was going to be up against the Deepkin player who was wiping the floor with everybody. And my opponent played it very well. Took the risk to go in on Karazai, calculated, decided that it was quite likely that he would murder Karazai and not take too much in return, and that turned out to be correct. So, my thoughts on the list as a whole. Palladors, really good. I like the wounds you have with them. When you compare them to things that are similar cost, so you've got like 6 Annihilators, 6 Long Strikes, the Pallador's damage output can potentially be lower than those 2 units, especially Annihilators, obviously. But for the points, you get twice as many wounds. You get 30 wounds instead of 18 for the Annihilators and 12 for the Long Strikes. So it's just an obscenely high upgrade on wounds, massive upgrade on speed. You have all kinds of weird things you can do with them. They give you much more utility, you can get to objectives with them and still actually threaten to take part in the game later, unlike Annihilators who once they're in one spot, they're kind of stuck there. So I do really like the Palladors. Going to give them more of a run out. Maybe comboing them with Krondis as well, so I can put the -1 to save spell on the enemy, which is going to work well with their -1 rend on everything. Only -1. And the good thing about debuffing the enemy rather than buffing your own troops with things is that the debuffs on the enemy are also going to affect all your companion attacks, like all out attack would, but some of the buffs you put on your own troops only affect riders rather than companions. So just negatively affecting the enemy is a sure way to get the companions' attacks boosted as well. So debuffs on the enemy, good. Krondis can also do another spell, so you can potentially get a purple sun in there as well, which is -2 to the save, so suddenly you're stacking these things up. So I want to try that combo. I also want to try Karazai and a Stardrake, because I think that would be a combat nightmare for people. It's just a question of which units are going to support them. So if you're a Stormcast fanatic, which units would you put in there supporting Karazai and a Stardrake? Because you do need bodies, you need objective takers if they're going to do all the killing. What else would you put in there? Would you put in another big hammer unit, like Annihilators or Palladors potentially, or Long Strikes, something that's going to do some killing? Or would you put in lots of utility units that are going to jump onto objectives? So you're talking like Questors, a Knight Zephyros maybe. Would you bring in Praetors as bodyguard for either or both of those units? Would you bring in I think it's the Knight Relictor to put -1 on enemy ward saves, which would obviously be something that could defend itself quite well against the dragons, except the Stardrake eating them. They don't get a ward save against being swallowed whole by a Stardrake, which is great. Let me know. The Bastion is good as well. The Bastion list, that Army of Renown, seems like a fun thing to try. I don't know whether I've got the models to do it, because I don't have enough Annihilators. But Bastion in general seems like fun. People are running him at the moment, so he's cool. I think he's had a boost because of Field Sergeant, which can be put onto a hero, because Bastion can let your units move pre-game, and then Field Sergeant lets them move faster. So it makes the infantry lists faster. So Bastion with the Reclusians, like I faced in Game 1, is quite good, although as you saw, what I was able to do, which was mostly avoid them, is still a thing, because they're not actually that fast, they're just a bit faster than terrible. So, where did I finish at the event? With 3 wins, a draw and a loss. Let's crack open the leaderboard. So, 16 players, and I finished, 4th place. So just outside the podium, and a nice positive victory point rate, because I had that one big win that tilted that up. 2 very tiny wins. This one loss, it wasn't that massive. It wasn't as one-sided as the game that I won by a huge margin earlier. And then the draw, obviously. I think I'm just really enthusiastic about Stormcast at the moment. There's all kinds of different lists I want to run, things I want to paint. I've seen lots of lists in action that run totally different things to me. I could play 4 games with Stormcast Eternals in a row, use totally different models in all of them probably, with the collection I've got. Let's have a look. It's entirely possible that I could do that, because I've got so many heroes from over the years. At least until some of the units get retired in June, I could do 3 or 4 games with the Stormcast in a row, with no units common between them, because I've got so many. Because, to give you a brief rundown, we've got Karazai or Krondys, we've got the Star Drake, you've got Yndrasta, Bastion, Vexilor, Heraldor, Incantor, Venator, Azeros, Gardas, Relictor, Zephyros, and those are just heroes, and I've not even named all of them because some of them are kind of behind a wall, so I can't see them all right now. But then Cavalry, I've got 6 Dracothian Guard, 6 Palladors, I've got a Chariot, I've got Ether Wings, I've got 6 Prosecutors, I've got Shield Annihilators, Grandhammer Annihilators, Retributors, Evocators, Liberators, Praetors, Long Strikes, Judicators / Vigilors, Questors. What else have we got in there? Vanquishers. A lot of stuff. And that's not including the things I haven't finished painting yet. I've got 2 Stormdrake Guard in their boxes still. I've got the entire Scaventide set apart from the Prosecutors, which I've painted already. So I've got Reclusians and a Terminos in there, and the Lord Vigilant, who I don't rate that highly, but I do like the Terminos and the Reclusian combo. So they're cool. They'll get painted at some point. So yeah, spoilt for choice really as a Stormcast player. It's not like these other factions where they get their book and a single foot hero. We usually get an entire range. It's almost like a range refresh, because they'll give you units that are very similar but have a slightly different name each time. So they're all different somehow. And even the ones that retire, like the Judicators are going to become Vigilors, my Retributors are just going to become more Grandhammer Annihilators, because they're basically the same thing. And I've got 5 of them, so there's the Annihilator Champion, the Lord Ordinator could become an Annihilator Champion. He looks like he's suitable for that, because he's getting retired as well. The Ballista is the only unit I don't think I can use after it gets retired, because there's nothing really that fits on that base size. But you could always just take the Ballistas off those bases, put them on a smaller base, and use them as long strikes. Why not? What else have we got that's getting retired? Evocators, I just don't like the models anyway, the Evocators. So I'll be happy not to use them again. I don't think they're very good. I think the entire Sacrosanct range of Stormcast, I don't like them particularly. I like the Knight Incantor, but she can pursue life as a different kind of wizard, because there's a few different ones she could fill in as. I like that model. All the others I'm not the biggest fan of from the 2nd edition range. I like the initial wave stuff. I think the original Liberators still look pretty cool. Celestant Prime's still good. The earliest stuff that looks really good, I think, is the Vanguard stuff. So you've got the Palladors and the Vanguard Hunters I still think look great. Modern stuff, pretty much all of it looks good. Can't think of any bad models that have come out recently for Stormcast. There's a couple of weird bits about them, like the Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker. The angle of his axe makes it look like it's bent, and it's a really thin connection point to his hand. So I think GW do this sometimes, where they'll design a miniature that doesn't have a golden angle, so wherever you take the picture from, it always looks weird. The worst offender of that was is it the Lumineth guy who's kind of standing on the... Is he standing on a bird's wing or something? But from any angle you look at it, it looks like he's either floating weirdly, or he doesn't have legs or something like that. Actually, a really bad offender is also Taunus the Redeemed / the New Knight Azeros. Whatever angle you look at that miniature, it looks weird. You only really appreciate it when you can see it in 360 and you look at all the different angles at the same time. But if you look at it head on, it looks like he's got no legs. Is it Teclis? Tomb King Tristan says it's techless. Yeah, so techless just looks weird from any angle, which I think is just poor design, to be cruel and honest. I think any miniature that you're designing should have a golden angle, and it's criminal that they don't have a strong silhouette. You don't want to have to go into 360 mode to be impressed by a miniature. You want to look at a flat image on a page and be wowed by it, and I don't think techless does that. Okay, this has gone on quite a while. 2 hours 35 minutes of non-stop Age of Sigmar battle report recap action. So let me know what you think about any of this. If you think any of the rules were played incorrectly as well, if anything I've brought up that I wasn't sure on, let me know if you've got a solid answer to it as well in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on the list, which units you want to see, which combos you think are really cool and strong right now, what you thought about the competition at this event. I thought the painting standard was very high, some very cool armies out there, and some really cool varied lists. Even between all the 7 Stormcast players, none of the lists were the same. And for Stormcast they shouldn't be, because you've got so many units to choose from. And just very enthusiastic about all game systems right now, but obviously I've just been playing Age of Sigmar all weekend, so I'm very into Stormcast mode right now. So, as we wrap this one up, don't forget to check out all the social media shenanigans and subscribe and all that good stuff. And if you want endless tournament reports, then why not pledge your entire life savings on the Patreon or the PayPal links below as well, which pretty much goes towards paying for my tournament attendance. And I'm trying to do 1 Age of Sigmar event per month, 1 Old World per month, 1 Star Wars Shatterpoint per month, and 1 Kings of War per month. That's the dream. It's not always feasible financially, so obviously if people want to pledge their entire life savings, that makes it easier. Kings of War is the more difficult one, because I usually have to travel further for that, because there aren't a lot of those in Nottingham, which is unfortunate. Those other 3 systems, though, just non-stop TSN Arena events all the time. If you want to attend any of the TSN events, by the way, the tickets are now on the TSN Arena. I think it's tsnarena.com, or if you just Google TSN Arena, go to the TSN website. They used to be on Eventbrite, but they're no longer available there. If that's where you're used to looking for your tickets, they're now on the TSN Arena website to get the tickets. So if you want to play against me sometime, then you should attend one of those events. And there's usually at least one person at an event that often they'll just recognise my voice, because on a lot of the battle reports I don't show my face. So if they haven't seen any of the live streams where my face is visible, then they'll hear my voice from across the room and they'll think, wait a minute, are you that guy from YouTube that does the battle reports? Yes, I am. And I'm quite happy to spend 2 or 3 hours after every event telling everyone how to beat my army. And then I'll have to change it and come up with something different. So I felt like this list was very competitive at this event. I was able to score points in all the games quite well. The units felt more survivable than usual. I felt like I could dish out a lot of punishment most of the time. I only really struggled in this one and against the Juggernauts. But it was just a very fun time. Fun opponents, fun games, fun armies, fun paint jobs to look at. Fun battles, fun hobby. Okay, it's time to wrap this one up, so get those comments in. In the Discord as well, I've got my Discord link below. There's some... You can keep up with what I'm doing there as well, and keep up with other people's paint jobs. All that remains to be said at this point is... good night out there. Whatever you are.